And we're live, I think. Oh, I think we were a bit late, actually. Probably a minute late. Probably just a minute late. As soon as I get some numbers in this corner, I will start the theme tune, and then we will be into tonight's show on Raconteurs News, Tuesday the 5th. It's the Cinco de Mayo, 5th of May. I think it's Independence Forward. There we go. We've got 41 people already in here, so we're going to play the music. Good evening and welcome to Raconteurs News this evening. It's the 5th of May 2020 and we are in the middle of possibly it's got to be the worst non-wartime situation that we've been in, and it's absolutely terrible, and we're going to get into it tonight. Anyway, good evening. Let me just say hello to a few people in the chat room. Good evening to Bird Turgler. Good name, great name. We love that. Owen Lloyd Martin, you're there as well. Thank you for coming on last night. Nick GB, he's there as well. Bandit Buster, Lion Share, Superleads, I'm sure he's there. Johnny Jam Shovel, he's keeping some of the people in the chat room. He's moderating in the chat room. Matthew Caddy's in there as well. Good evening to you all. We've got a show that is just going to go. As far as I'm concerned, I think this is just going to go absolutely bananas. So I want to start right from the very start. Let's introduce our guest this evening. Good evening, Neil Sanders. Thank you. It's been it's been over a year since I've been trying to get you on, and I finally got you on. How are you doing, my old friend?
Well, I mean, I'm bored, obviously, and I'm annoyed and tetchy, and I'm pissed off, and I'm sick of the lockdown. Like I'm sure everybody is, basically. I'm quite lucky in as much as basically where I live, I can get out and go for a walk and stuff like that, and it's not. I'm in the sticks, and there's no police, so you're not getting hassled anyway. But it's crap, isn't it? It's like even though basically, to be quite honest, it's just been like one long Sunday for me. I've been living like a student on takeaways and watching films and just, smoking, drinking, all types of ill shit, that sort of stuff. But it's because you've got the knowledge that it's not your choice not to go out, and because there's nowhere to go anyway. You can't go to the pub. You could, but it's not open. So you've got this sort of low level. It's just nonsense. The problem that you find is that basically what I found is you set up all these things to do, like I'm going to watch this film, I'm going to read this book, I'm going to do this, I'm going to better my mind, I'm going to decorate and all this, and then you go to do it and you go, and your brain just says, you're only doing this to fill time, you don't really want to do this, and so you end up not doing it. So I've found that the best way is to just let it wash over you like a sort of wave, and until sort of a genuine boredom comes on, and then you go, oh, I fancy doing that now, and so I've mostly been playing on the computer.
It's not just the boredom, though, is it? I mean, it's the motivation. The motivation's not there to do anything. I've got so many ideas flashing around my head, going around my head. Oh, I could do this. I've just had this room. I've just had this lift put in this room, so this room's accessible. I just come from my dining room straight into this room. I've got a little desk here. I've got everything. I'm talking to you. I've got a turntable there that I can play all my old records that I've got on and everything. It's the motivation is completely gone, and I don't know where that's gone, because I know that I've had trouble with motivation over the last couple of years, but it just seems that at this point it's motivation. It's not just myself, but it's also my wife. It's also people I know and members of my family. Have you experienced that?
Absolutely, yeah. And everybody I've spoken to is exactly the same. And I suppose it's because you've always got this sort of background of stress, like be that sort of economic stress, be that because you're actually worried about the virus, or you're worried about somebody that might have the virus, or you're just worried that, like, you know, we don't know what's going to happen, how long is this lockdown going to go on. You've always got that sort of underlying stress. And so when you're trying to do stuff, it's just, I mean, that's what it is with me as well. A lot of the time, it's like my brain will literally go, I'm not doing that. I can't be bothered to take on any more stress, even if it's just as something as simple as, oh, you should really go and like do that pile of pots that's been sat there. Like, do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I think that's it, and I totally get it. I understand everybody's frustrations, and I understand everybody's worries, because the response has been crap. Like, the government have been just piss poor in every respect. Like, the messaging is not
Sorry,
clear.
I know I'm interrupting. I don't want to interrupt. I just wanted to get just to a point that I just wanted to make a point of what part of what you were saying there is that, you know, how people have got no motivation and they do things. Now, is that because in their head there's no deadline?
Yeah.
There's no deadline for anything. So, you know, it's like the guy who takes 6 months to do something. There's no deadline in his head. As soon as there's a deadline, he'll do it every day. And is that the same sort of psyche?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, everybody went out. Yeah, no, definitely. Sorry, Jess. Yeah, absolutely. Everybody went out and bought DIY stuff and gym equipment, and I guarantee it's just sat there because that seemed like the thing to do. But the problem is that's not the thing that you like to do. So you would just literally just say it's busy work. I know it was. I tell you, what's a weird thing as well. I don't know whether other people have experienced this, but I've got a pile of films down there and a pile of books down here that I desperately want to read all of them. And even though we're in week 7, I've avoided doing it because if I read it, I've got nothing left to read. Do you know what I mean? I know that's stupid, but it's kind of like when you're falling and your first parachute goes and you think, I'm not sure if I want to pull this reserve parachute because that's my last one. Do you know what I mean? That's stupid.
Mental preservation. You know, you're preserving something that's going to stimulate you mentally. Yeah, and that's completely understandable in this situation that we find us in. I mean, but I know that you don't particularly have the similar opinions to what is going on. I mean, what are your opinions of this COVID-19? I know you said that the government's handling of it is crap, and we'll probably get to that later. And this question I'm going to ask you, and I just want you to. I'm just going to let you go. It's like an elastic band. So what's your take?
Well, my personal opinion of it is the virus is real. Viruses are obviously real. Viruses can be passed from animal to person. Viruses can be passed from person to person. And this virus is real, unfortunately. It's not the end of the world. So this is the point. I don't want everybody to think that I'm being hysterical or that I'm frightened that basically we're all doomed, because it's really not that sort of a virus. It is immensely survivable, and it is actually controllable. We've seen examples where basically there's been next to no impact. Places like Vietnam, places like Eastern Europe. New Zealand has just come off lockdown and people are going back to work there. But it's about how it was handled. There's a lot of nonsense about there that basically has never been shown to exist, and just very, very silly stuff that's flying around, which is all not true. And furthermore, as I say, the problem with this particular virus is what's called the R factor, which means that basically if you got flu, okay, and you'd get ill and you'd know you're ill, and so you won't go around to see your gran, for example. But with this, you get it and you can have it for up to 14 days without exhibiting symptoms. This is what we know so far. So in that time, you can go off and meet all sorts of people. So this is why places like Germany and was successful, because they did mass testing. So anybody that was exhibiting symptoms or was found to be ill, they were isolated so that they couldn't come into contact with people who were vulnerable. And in other places, like in Eastern Europe, they locked down all the borders. They stopped planes coming in, and they took it seriously. There's a bit of a misnomer that's going around at the minute with places like Sweden and Japan and other places like that saying, well, they didn't lock down.
Sorry, Neil, have you been on StreamYard before?
Have I been on what?
On StreamYard before, this platform that we're on. I'm just wondering if you can see the comments.
No.
Can you see the comments that are coming in right on your right on
live comments?
Screen, it'll say private comments, and then you'll be able to see all the public comments that are coming in. So, can you see them?
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
Some people have gone through an entire show and not we've not told them where comments are. So I just wanted to make sure you knew where the comments.
Yeah, I'm seeing all the CVs being put on every desk. People died of flu this year. How many have died of flu this year? We'll get to all this. Don't panic. I'm not an arsehole. Like, right, I'm gonna turn that off because it's distracting me. So where were we? Right, so there's a lot of basically in places like Sweden and stuff like that, people saying, well, they didn't lock down there, for example. Like, why is it that they're so successful there? And it's just what it boils down to is basically a difference of culture. Like in Japan, for example, they are actually in a state of emergency. They didn't lock down, but what they do in Japan, it's an honor culture, and basically they shamed the public. They were publicly shaming people who were going against the measures. In Sweden, for example, they basically they don't have to institute it in law. Schools shut down voluntarily. Some businesses shut down voluntarily, and they're observing social distancing guidelines, right? And that's voluntarily. In England, the pub across the road from me keeps having lock-ins behind the closed shutter, and that's during an order. So it's not directly comparable. That is a problem that is going on. Basically, there's a massive misnomer that's going around as well about people saying dying of COVID or dying with COVID, right? And this is a complete straw man argument that basically misunderstands how this works. And again, I'm going to totally reiterate this. It's not a scary virus. It's not there in New Zealand anymore. If we'd have handled this better and differently, there would be no need for any deaths. There would be no need for any economic hardship. There would be no need for the lockdown anymore. And I'm not a fan of the lockdown. I wish it was over too. So that's my position. But anyway, this concept of dying with it or dying of it. Nobody dies of it. Right. What
sorry, you explained this to me very well. I want you to explain exactly how you explained it to me earlier on when we were having a chat. Sorry, just
no. And if I'm going off and not being clear, then please pull me up on it. What happens is there's a virus that's called SARS-CoV-2, and when you catch this virus, which has a particularly long R0 rate on it, it can develop into the disease called COVID. Now, COVID doesn't kill you, right? What COVID does, because it's a new disease that basically we don't have an immunity to, and we're not used to it yet. We haven't developed any sort of response to it, or we don't know. Again, we just don't know because basically we've not done a lot of testing. But what happens is that it's a sort of immunosuppressant. It's kind of like basically if you're the way I saw it described was if you're a bouncer at a club and there's something kicking off at the back, you have to go and look at that, and then all of these other people can get in through the front door. Essentially what it does is it occupies your immune system. What COVID does in a symptomatic sense is it gives you this cough, and depending on how far down its throat it gets, it can cause this thing called shattered glass lesions in the lungs, and it literally looks like somebody's exploded a glass grenade in your lungs. And what this does is it causes lesions that start to fill with this fluid. Now, the reason this fluid is particularly dangerous is because it doesn't react like normal pneumonic fluid. It doesn't react to antibiotics at all, and this is why basically people being put in intubation, there often is no hope for them, because it's really just prolonging the expected. So what happens is how you die through this is either that you develop the pneumonia and the pneumonia kills you, or that causes acute respiratory distress syndrome that then stops you from breathing, and so you drop dead. Or alternatively, because your immune system is so overwhelmed trying to deal with this particular new disease that it sort of forgets to look at the things that you would perfectly happily surviving with using medication, things like diabetes, high blood pressure, asthma, kidney problems, epilepsy, things like that. Now, this is one of the things, because people say everybody who's died of it, or 80% of people who have died of it in Italy, have got a comorbidity or an underlying condition. Well, yes, that's absolutely correct, because that's how it kills you. But the number one underlying condition that was actually attributed to COVID was high blood pressure. And about 30% of the world have got high blood pressure. So if you think that it would be normal that 30% of the world would suddenly drop dead, it's not. And this is the point. Yes, there's some people who are dying who would have died, but what it's done is it has accelerated that death. They weren't going to die on Tuesday. They were expected to survive. Eddie Large, I imagine people are screaming Eddie Large in the comments. He went in and had heart failure because basically he was having a heart operation. He was expected to survive the heart operation. It was the extra stress of this immunoresponse that was basically buggering up his normal capacity to deal with something that was perfectly survivable, and he died because it weakened him. There is a further.
So when you're saying what you're saying essentially is when it says that people died with COVID-19, right? And the word there is with.
Yeah.
COVID-19 rather than of. It's similar to somebody who died of an AIDS-related illness. Nobody ever died of AIDS.
It's exactly like that, because basically
that's how I understood you were trying to.
No, that's exactly it. Is what I was just about to say. Basically, if you look at the death certificate of Eazy-E or Freddie Mercury or Liberace or whatever, who all died of AIDS, it doesn't say AIDS on their death certificate. What it actually says is they died of bronchial pneumonia or something like that. And then on the third line down, which is your underlying effects, it says autoimmune deficiency syndrome, right? You could not, accuse people of juking the stats for AIDS by saying that Freddie Mercury died of AIDS when technically he didn't die of AIDS, which is the misunderstanding about how this disease works. Nobody is going to die of COVID, right? The people that sadly pass away from it are either dying of this sort of pneumonia, which is detectable because and distinct because okay, we'll get on to that. Aid Hardy, free speech. No, this detectable pneumonic fluid is completely like nothing that anybody has seen before. It is completely resistant to antibiotics, and there doesn't seem to be a lot that can be done for it, except in cases where people basically, their immune response is strong enough to fight it off. Now, a lot of people will probably be saying that, okay, but they're writing in COVID on every single death certificate. Could we pull up one of the pictures, please?
Yeah, sure, no problem. Which one is it that you want?
Hang on, let me have a look. Could we have COVID? What does the example say?
Right, okay, let me find you because you are in separate. Let me search.
The long and the short of it is this. There was a doctor that came out and basically said, and this has been repeated by a number of people who are basically shilling for money on the internet, and nobody seems to have bothered to have checked this. What he showed was the NVSS document, and this NVS document shows how to code COVID on death certificates. And this is the example that he actually uses in the video, and this is the example that's used by Dr. Buttar and Dr. Shiva and God knows who else, that basically repeat the same argument that they've not really bothered to check. And there's a glaring error that will become apparent if we get the picture up.
We will get the picture up.
Essentially, right, what it says on this document, and you can check again, and we've got further pictures that will prove this. Again, I've got all the proof. what it says on this actual death certificate that they are showing as COVID as the cause of death doesn't have COVID as the cause of death. It has acute respiratory. What does it say on it? Acute respiratory disorder. And let me find it so that I can read it before it comes up on the screen.
Right. I will find this, by the way.
Okay.
It's gone somewhere.
It says acute respiratory distress syndrome, immediate cause or the final disease or condition resulting in death. Acute respiratory distress syndrome, due to or in consequence of pneumonia, due to or as a consequence of, which is the underlying cause, in brackets C, COVID-19. So even on the example that he actually uses to show that they're juking the stats by putting COVID-19 as the cause of death, it doesn't actually have COVID death as the cause of death. Now, what they're actually doing here is they're either badly researching or they're misunderstanding how these statistics are put together. There's two ways of looking at this, and again, I wanted to have a look at a different picture, but we'll get to these. So
we'll get them. We'll get them. Yeah. I've got them. I found them.
Okay.
I'm just trying to now find them. This fucking laptop is so ridiculous. There's so many different places where it says downloads. You know what I mean? And oh,
it's fine. Don't panic. As and when.
Download.
Anyway, the reason that COVID is being put on death certificates is because basically it's a new disease. It's a pandemic. Now, what people are not understanding is that there's two distinct ways of recording the death. There's codes that are put out there by the World Health Organization, IO7-1 and IO7-2. IO7-1 is the one that's used by the DHCS, which is the government website, the Department of Health and Civil Services, and that's the one that's put out on the news. That's the one that's put out on the news in America. That is the go-to figure. That's the figure that's announced daily. And what that is it's death certificates where the patient has tested positive for COVID and they've died in either a hospital or a nursing home scenario. So
images. I've got the images. Tell me which one you wanted.
Oh, sorry. COVID example. What does it say? Well, sorry, COVID. What does the example say?
Yeah, okay. That. Not that.
Hey.
That's it, isn't it? There we go.
The one. Okay, so this is the example that's actually being touted around as proof that basically COVID is being used as the cause of death. If you actually look at the death certificate at the bottom, the one that he chose to use as his example, it doesn't have COVID as the cause of death. It has it as the underlying condition that caused pneumonia, that caused acute respiratory distress syndrome. And what this is an example of the IO7-1 code, which is somebody that has tested positive for COVID in a hospital scenario. Okay, so that is definite, as sure as you can, that this person had the virus. Okay, and even in that scenario, it's not the cause of death on the actual death certificate. So people are lying about that. If you could be so kind as to go to IO7 codes, please.
Let me just get this.
Sorry.
That's all right. No problem. I'll hide that one so you can carry on. IO7 codes.
Yes, please.
There we go. Okay.
So what this is going to show is how they categorize.
Oh, God, it always was the wrong one. Sorry.
What this does is it categorizes. This is the guidelines. This is the official guidelines. And you'll see what we've got here is new ICD-10 codes for COVID-19. U07.1 COVID virus identified. That means that it's been identified in a test in a hospital scenario. And then you've got another distinct separate code, right? U07.2 COVID virus not identified, clinically, epidemiologically diagnosed, probable or suspected. Okay, and I shall tell you for why. But first, I'm going to make one point, right? You know, if they wanted to juke the stats, show everybody's dying of COVID, why would they have two codes? Because the point of those two codes is so that you can distinguish between people that have definitely tested positive for it and people who haven't tested positive for it. They haven't even had a chance to get a test, but you suspect that they might have shown symptoms, or there's some sort of other anecdotal evidence why. And I'll tell you for why. Because in a pandemic scenario like this, right, you've got two choices. Let's say there's an old lady and she's phoned 111 early in the week and she says she's got ever such a high temperature and a dry cough, and she thinks she might have the COVID, right? But she never gets tested, and we don't know. She could have just caught anything. It could just be a bug, and she goes to the hospital and dies of an asthma attack. Now, you've got two choices at this point. What you could do is you could say, we've got no chance to test this person at the minute. What we could do is we could put a code on there that says that this might be somebody that's connected to the disease, because then we can inform their relatives so they don't catch it, and doctors and nurses and porters and people that work in the hospital, and coroners and funeral workers and family members and other patients. They would know not to come into contact with this potentially contagious body. What we could also do is use that second lot of data in order to track where this virus is spreading, the sort of people that it might be affecting, and see how long.
Whilst you're saying that, I mean, if we're talking about something that, like you said earlier on, is nothing that to somebody that's able-bodied, and I consider myself able. I'm not in that. I wouldn't consider myself in that group. Sorry, I forgot even where I was going. Go on. You carry on.
Sorry, but the point is that basically, and then you can track the disease, but make sure that that's distinct from the subset of figures where people are definitely tested for it.
Right, that's the point I was going to make. That's the point I'm going to make. Right, so they've got two sets of figures. One figure is people that have actually tested for COVID-19 that have died, right? Yeah. And they've tested positive. It doesn't mean to say that they've died of COVID-19. It's just on the death certificate as part, because it is a part of if this virus is as you're describing it, that is a part of the way that that person's died. Yeah. Now, so when you've got one set of figures where it's you're not saying the people that all there have died of COVID-19, but they had. They tested positive for it. I mean, the testing systems are another thing. It's been mad.
We'll get into that. Don't panic.
I know we will, but I'm just fucking wondering whether we've got I'm going to be wacky. I'm going to be like turning around. It's going to be light again when I'm finished, because there's that many things. But so what you're saying, there's people that's died. They've tested positive for COVID, and they're in one set. They're in one group, and then there are people that have died who've not been tested, where it's possible that COVID was a point because they might have deteriorated in a manner quicker than expected, or they might have just dropped dead out of blue of something underlying, but the probability is there was COVID in there. So that's the other set of figures. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, exactly that. Because basically it helps track. I mean, the other thing that you could do, the other option is just to ignore that and just go, oh, we've not tested this person, even though there's evidence that suggests that there might be, interesting or useful data that we can take out of this, and we'll just ignore it. We'll just ignore it and just see what happens. So that's why they have two codes, IO71 and IO72. Okay, and that is this, as I say, bizarrely, everyone's saying that they're upping the figures. They're not. The figure that they use on the news is the DHCS figure. Could you put up the please the picture DHCS versus ONS figures?
Yep. What did you say? What's first? DHS, did you say?
Yeah, DHCS versus ONS figures.
Okay, there we go. Open. Let's see. Another one?
Thank you very much. Okay, so this basically you can see in the first column on the left, this is the DHSC, COVID-19 is published on gov.uk. And this basically is deaths in hospitals. If you go down to the bottom, deaths inclusions, deaths where patients has been tested for COVID-19. Okay, now if you look to the other two, the middle column and the right at the top, you'll see that these are ONS COVID deaths registered, and this is ONS, right? So that is the Office of National Statistics. And if you go down to the bottom of inclusion, that's deaths where COVID-19 has been mentioned on the death certificate. So the DHSC, the far left column, that is the low figure, that's the announced every day on the news, that's that everybody that's tested positive, okay? And the ONS figure is all the statistical data that they're collating, where they basically anybody that might be connected to the death is. And as we've said, there are good reasons for doing that, to be quite honest. Now, could you be so kind?
What are those good reasons? Just give, I mean, you can say, what are the good reasons for doing that? I'm sorry.
Well, as I said, basically, there's a practical reason in as much as basically you know that that body might be contaminated. Now, to what degree, we don't know is the contaminant, but basically just as a sort of safeguard, it stops other patients, other hospital staff, other people that deal with the funeral and family members and people like that from coming into contact unnecessarily with a contagious body and doing something that they might not do if they knew that it had there was a disease present there. And the second thing that you can do is you can track it. You can use that to see, well, actually, there was a huge amount of people that all died in Norwich, say, that we didn't test for, but they all died of the same thing, and they all had this IO72 code on. So it's probable that that was somehow connected. So what you can do is you can take that data and you can track it to figure out the spread of the virus, where it was at what time, who actually is more susceptible to it, what age range dies from it, that sort of stuff. So that's why the Office of National Statistics takes far longer to collect data because of the way it's reported. Now, just to explain, that's why there was a story in the Off Guardian where people said they were lying. They told us on this particular date that 980 people died. And I checked the figures and only 177 people died, so they're lying. It's all lies, I tell you. And there's a very good reason for that, because the number that is announced on the day isn't people who've died on that day. It's people who've had their death certificates processed on that day, because it takes time to process a death certificate. So you can't report a death on the day that it's died, because you've got to do a bit of investigation to figure out exactly what happened. And at the minute, there is a large backlog of death certificates. Could you be so kind as to put up ONS deaths and flu April, please?
ONS deaths from flu.
And flu. Yes, please.
It's just a loading. That should be it.
That's it. Thank you very much. Okay, so what this is basically the figures, and this is taken from, right, I hate to be confusing, but basically this is why they don't explain it properly on the news. And again, it's the news's fault, because if they said, oh, 980 people didn't die today, they died between Tuesday and Thursday, but trust us, the figure is up to here. It's only the best way that they can actually do it. This shows you how far behind. This is going up to the 24th of April, and we're now on the 5th of May. What this is the collation of all the registered deaths. This is death certificates. And the COVID-19 deaths on this particular graph are only the deaths that have been registered in hospital. Okay? So what we can see from this graph is that 5-year average, that's the 5-year average of expected deaths at this time of year, right? Okay, and what we can see is that we've had about 11,000 more deaths than we should. You'll see that flu and influenza is the same. Average deaths is average deaths. So that includes everybody that's dying of cancer, that includes everybody who's dying of heart attacks, that includes everybody that falls off buildings and gets run over. It includes everyone that's getting flu. It includes everybody that's getting pneumonia and dying of it and not testing positive for COVID. And yet, on top of that, we have an extra 11,000 deaths. Now, again, that makes me sound hysterical and like, oh, we're all going to die. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that basically this is the only data that we've got. Hopefully, what we're going to find is that antibody tests or whatever show that everybody's had this and it's fine and the death rate is minuscule and it's in line with like a normal flu or something like that. And it was just unfortunate the way that it managed to whip through particular populations, and you know, and it was terrible. But we don't have that data yet because we haven't got widespread testing. And so it's one of these things where people say, well, the testing will show that it's actually far less deadly. It's like, well, yeah, but the testing could conceivably show the opposite, that it's far more deadly. We don't know. We simply don't know. The only usable data that we have at the minute is that there's an extra 11,000 deaths 11 days ago, already this year. And I know people are going to be shouting, I'm not even checking the comments, they're going to be saying, January 2018, there was more deaths then than there was in than this year. And yeah, there was. But there was, again, a problem with the way that that was put out. On the day that that was actually put out, we'd already recorded an extra 12,000 registered deaths. It just takes time to catch up. So once you're absolutely right, there was a time when the recorded deaths were lower than January 2018 up until this point. We've blown that out of the water now. And again, I'm not telling people to panic or to be hysterical or to think that this is Ebola or plague or that it's the end of the world or a zombie apocalypse or anything like that. But lots of people are saying that this is nothing, and that's just.
I just want to, because there are people that were going to say that this is not. I've seen that a virus is not alive. I've seen various things.
Viruses aren't alive; they're a non-living organism.
Just if you just give me a minute, Neil. I just want to say something. I want to say something, and I've got to say I'm appalled with our chat room. I'm appalled with people that are supposed to be open-minded, that just because that what they believe is having some measure put towards it and some mirror put up to it, that it's just shills and bollocks and all this fucking. And I really am. I'm going to turn. I'm not going to turn the comments off. People can still comment. I'm just not going to fucking read them. Because we know that there are these fucking stories. We know that you get. Look at. I just want to show you something. Just something that I fucking saw tonight, and I thought. I mean, what use is this? It was somewhat on Facebook. I'm sorry to take up your time, and I'm sorry for interrupting you.
No,
but
fine, man.
Honestly, I thought that we'd be able to have a conversation, and then people would say, well, what about this? And then we could answer that question.
It's fine. It's fine, because stick around, because I'm going to wipe the floor with Andrew Kaufman and Dr. Shiva and Rashid Buttar, and I'm going to show what grifters they are and how you really should have checked out their character and really should just actually, listen to what they said and go and check it for yourself rather than blindly believing someone on the internet. So it's fine. It's absolutely fine. We're going to get to all your comments. It's fine.
It's not that though. It's me personally, as somebody that's invited you onto this show, and I've invited you on it. I've been trying to get you on this show. I mean, we had not a misunderstanding, but we didn't.
We just agreed. Two adults do, because that's what people do. And you know what? We're still friends.
Of course we are. And it just really winds me up that people that I think that come to listen to us, I think are open-minded, and I've always on this show I've had when I had fucking Mark Steele and his fucking lackey on, and they started making accusations against somebody. I had her on the following week. Right? In the end, none of them will talk to me. But, you know, I gave them both a fucking platform. And this is what really pisses me off, because I thought that our audience were just a little bit more than that. And I thought that any trolls that came along that I thought would be dealt with. Any questions will be answered. Believe me, they will be answered. Anything that you want to know. I spoke to Neil for an hour this afternoon. And if nothing else, I didn't agree with everything he said. I don't suppose he agreed with everything I said. He agreed that Nottingham Forest he said Nottingham Forest had beaten non-league side 7-0. I didn't agree with that. But we can talk about it. This is the thing, we can talk about it, and we have to talk about it, because if we don't talk about it, we're just going to get fucking put down one channel or down another, and it's into the same fucking meat grinder. We need to talk to each other and be able to understand each other, even if you don't agree. Be able to understand each other. And I'm sorry about that, Ram, but it's just fucking really pissed me off. Some of the comments. So I'm not going to be reading the comments in the chat room. If you've got any questions, you can send them to me. If you know me, you can send them, mate, and we'll pop them in, anything like that. But I'm just not reading comments, because it's just it's a fucking absolute joke out there. It's just like fucking mudslinging. It's like a fucking playground where let's throw. But you remember I don't know if you're old enough. I'm 50. I was 50 last week. And I remember, you know, back in the day of where you go to school in the morning and there'd be a big pile of coal, and you'd all be lobbing coal at each other, you know, in the early morning. A bit like Kez.
Yeah, I've seen Kez.
You know, and they'd be throwing coal at each other. And that's what this is reminding me of. And it's really pissing me off, because I thought we had a lot, I thought we had a lot more grown up audience than that, and I expected some people to come in and say some things, but I at least expected them to listen to you if they didn't agree with you. So anyway, carry on.
It's like the best new music. People, it's the best. You just never appreciate it during a lifetime. That's the thing that happens. Like, okay, so where we got to? So we've shown that basically the thing about the
let's go for the virus isn't alive thing.
Okay, the virus isn't alive. The viruses aren't really alive. It's this weird thing where basically they need a host in order to replicate. They self-replicate, but they show a desire to survive is a weird thing. So what they're classified as is a non-living organism. And there's a debate, basically. Alive, dead doesn't really cut it, because it really boils down to, like, you know, the sort of the structure and sort of definitions of what is alive and dead. But no, it's not alive. It's a non-living organism. But so what's your point? Like, we know this. Like, that this is true. I imagine there's going to be a lot of people in there saying that viruses don't exist and stuff like that, which is basically like, who was it? It was Béchamp came up with this, and the reason he came up with this was because he was embarrassed that Louis Pasteur had beaten him. Basically, like, it really boils down to that. He was a religious zealot, this guy, and basically he's just a bit of an idiot. And yeah, he was totally wrong about it. I mean, like, but to say, oh, viruses don't exist is to just dismiss 170 years of stuff that you know is true. You know, you've caught a cold. You know, raw dog a prosa with HIV. Then, if you really believe that, go on. I'll pay for it. I'll find her and I'll pay for it, and we'll film it. Okay, and then we'll just see what the results are. Okay, that seems fair. All right, you know, inbox me. So there we go. That's the challenge. But it's just nonsense, really. Basically, a lot of people are going to be, So basically, that just boils down to a fundamental misunderstanding of virology, because virology is a very, very difficult subject. I don't even myself pretend to understand completely, but I can understand it enough by reading the textbooks to know that what people have been saying about it is utter lies, basically. So let's just do the HCID thing before we get on to Andrew Kaufman, because basically that's where a lot of people have got a lot of this bollocks from, is from this person who they've not bothered to check. They've just, again, blindly believed what he said on the internet. The HCID thing, a lot of people made a big deal about that. Like, oh, the government very quietly dropped it from a HCID to not a HCID. And this was just prior to the lockdown, so why are we locked down? And it's like, they didn't very quietly do it. They announced it on the government website. As far as government announcement goes, there's only one higher than that, which is to announce it on the television. And basically, everyone got very excited about this and was like, oh, wow, if it's not a HCID, then it can't be bad. As if it has to be in the very top echelon in order for it to be bad. Could you please do me a favor and pop up definition of a HCID, please?
Definition of a HCID.
Yeah. Now, what HCID is a highly contagious infectious disease, and it's things like Lassa fever and monkeypox and Ebola, and it's stuff that's really, really mental. It's got a very, very high death rate. And yeah, this is it. So this is the definition of a HCID, and you'll see the number 2 is typically as a high case fatality rate. Now, case fatality rate is the IO71 that we were talking about before, the one that's shown on the news, the one that's shown in that graph, the one that's announced every day, the low figure. Right? Okay, so this is it, as opposed to the infection rate, which is the IO72. And I'll repeat it again. If they were mashing these figures together, why would they provide 2 codes so that you could tell which was which? It's so stupid. Right, anyway, the ability, well, here we go, often difficult to recognize and detect rapidly. So typically has a high case fatality rate, often difficult to recognize and detect rapidly. Well, COVID hasn't got either of those things. It hasn't got a high case fatality rate. The highest thing that I've seen is about 7%, and we don't know because in some countries it's been less than 1%. And we have the ability to recognize this rapidly now. We have tests for it. There are various tests that can be used in order to test for this. I'll just do the test thing now. The 4 tests that there are, well, there's 5 really. One is the PCR test, which we'll come on to because Andrew Kaufman lies about it, and I want to dispel all of that. There's a swab test that goes either up your nose or down your throat, and it basically tests for the RNA of the genome of the pathogen. It looks for antigens, and antigens are distinct to the pathogen of the isolated virus, which was isolated in Korea ages ago. So anyone that says that is just a liar. Anyway, the second test is a serological test or a blood test that also looks for antigens. There's a third blood test that looks for the proteins that are released during this disease. And again, all this is based on the isolated genome of the virus, which we'll come on to in a moment. There is 2 practical ways of testing this, and they were doing this in China initially because it basically speeds things up. What happens, as we said, is that it explodes in your chest. It causes this like a glass explosion, which causes pneumonia, and it leaves a striation scarring pattern that looks like it's called like a shattered glass explosion. And people can see that it's totally distinct from any other type of pneumonia. So basically, just by seeing the scarring pattern on their lungs, you can tell that this is distinct to this particular disease. And the final way that they've been doing this is by looking at the fluid that builds up within the lungs. Now, the problem with pneumonia is basically because it's bacterial infection, it causes this fluid to fill up with the lungs, and it stops you from breathing effectively, and you die. Now, they treat this with antibiotics. Now, antibiotics are not working in regards to COVID patients, which is basically, so that is another way that you can detect it. If you've got this brand new pneumonic fluid, which is exactly what Carl Siddell was describing. He says something weird is happening. He says it's more akin to like mountain sickness and stuff like that than it is akin to
sickness.
Yeah, than a normal pneumonia. But this is the thing that people seem to have missed about Carl Siddell. You got his Twitter, he tells you, yeah, it's real. Yeah, it's something that we've never seen before. I'm not telling people not to use ventilators. I'm telling them to use, there's 2 settings for them. You can either basically force the air into the lungs, and basically what he's finding is that these people are so weak that it's just killing them, basically. Yeah. So he's suggesting a more softly approach. Now, the problem with this softly approach, which he himself says as well, is that basically often it's just not enough, and these people are dying anyway, which is a terrible shame. But that's yet another thing that has been misrepresented by people in the alternative media, that you could take 5 seconds to go on Carl Siddell's Twitter and ask him. You can ask him this. You can actually ask him, and he will respond and say, no, it's this, it's blah blah blah, and this is what I'm saying. So I think we should probably get on to Andrew Kaufman now, because that's where a lot of people are getting this shtick. Like they're saying the tests don't work and the tests can't work. And one of the principles.
Before we get onto Kaufman, I'd just like to remind everybody you're listening to Raconteurs News with me, Jason Holmes, and my guest tonight is Neil Sanders, author and COVID. Well, COVID, I wouldn't say you're not a COVID expert. I think you describe yourself as a COVID expert, but you're somebody who's been researching, the claims that have been made by certain people that do get bandied around. And then we've got stuff to talk about, like David Icke becoming the most censored man yet he's everywhere and all that sort of stuff. But anyway, it's Raconteurs News. So if you like us, give us a subscribe and press that bell. You'll know whenever we're going to be coming on. And please give us a thumbs up or a thumbs down if you don't like it. Any which way we like at all. So that's all, both on Facebook and on YouTube as well. Neil, let's get on to Andy Kaufman. Do you know, it's funny because I keep saying that these things in my life like come in, and we were talking about something today, and I said, I just watched a video of that.
Oh yeah.
I can't remember what it were, but I said I just watched a documentary on that on Netflix or something. Well, the strange thing is I watched on Netflix last night. I watched a film that was it was following Jim Carrey around while he was imitating, while he was playing and he was in the character the whole time. And it's just, I know it's only a name, but it was just like that. I watched that last night, and
but just didn't you think that basically what I took from that documentary was, good God, like Jim Carrey's an insufferable wanker. Like you couldn't get away with that level of just fuck off. You're not in the character. You're just using this to get away with whatever you want to get away with.
Exactly. You thought to yourself, it's just been a cunt, and it's been a cunt for absolutely no reason at all. Other than he's portraying what he perceives as to have been a con, really, but you get all the family around and they say, it's like having Andy back, and it just shows you that he's a good actor. That's all it is, he's acting. Sorry, carry on. We got Andy Kaufman.
Anyway, so Andy Kaufman basically appears out of nowhere, and he basically starts making some very, very wild claims, right? Now, the mainstay, this is basically the foundation of his entire shtick, right? Okay, we'll get into his character later, but if you could just be so kind as to put up do COVID isolated paper, because one of his main claims is that basically the virus doesn't exist, the virus has never been shown to exist, the virus has never been isolated properly, and it doesn't fulfill Koch's postulates. He does talk a bit like that. Anyway, thank you. Okay, so this is basically the identification of coronavirus isolated from a patient in Korea with COVID-19. Following reports of patients with an unexplained pneumonia at the end of December 2019 in Wuhan, China, the causative agent was identified as coronavirus SARS-CoV-2. Now, to be fair, to be absolutely 100% fair to him, right, I know why he's saying that. Because basically when this paper was published, or when the first paper was published in the New England Medical Journal, it says at the end of it, this does not satisfy Koch's postulate. Now, Koch's postulate is to isolate it, is to cultivate it and to filter it. And then what you've got to do is you've got to put it into an animal. You've got to transfer it from from that animal into a separate animal, and then you've got to extract it from the second animal. And the first experiments that were done, that were shown in the New England Medical Journal, they only did the first 3, because these were the first papers that were rushed out. So they isolated it, they filtered it, and they cultured it. Right, so fulfilling 3 of it. Now, if you could be so very kind as to put up COVID monkey Koch's postulate paper. It should be just the next one.
Yeah, I just need to upload them. COVID
But essentially, the point of this is that basically very, very shortly afterwards, they started experimenting on mice, and they found that basically they were able to, thank you, they were able to basically fulfill Koch's postulate in mice. But as some people are probably going mentally in the live comments, mice isn't the gold standard is monkeys. So that's exactly what they did. They got loads of different types of monkeys, and they found that the one that reacted the most similarly to humans was macaques. So what you're seeing here is the Koch's postulate fulfilling experiment that was done on macaque monkeys to show what happens with this disease. So anybody that says the virus doesn't exist, the virus has never been shown to exist, the virus hasn't been isolated, or the virus does not fulfill Koch's postulate is either lying or just hasn't come across this information. But now you have come across this information, so we can put that silliness to bed. If you could just go to shattered glass effect in monkeys' lungs and in cells. And what this is taken from that second paper, and it shows the actual chest x-rays of the monkeys, the macaque monkeys that were involved, and it shows, as you can see, where the lesions are forming due to the shattered glass. And that sort of what you can see there with the sort of the shadows on the lungs is where it's starting to fill with pneumonic fluid. Okay, and what you can see in the bottom, all the pink bits and stuff like that, is where the cells are starting to get broken down. What this does is it forms lesions within the cells, and this causes the immunoresponse. So that is just totally blown out the water. What he says as well, Andrew Kaufman, is that when he was trained at medical school, and I know which medical school he was at, but this will become apparent later, it was South Carolina, but he wasn't there for very long. When he was there, he was trained that basically you can't pass a disease from an animal to a human. And it's like, that's just not true. Like, let a rabid dog bite you. In fact, you can go to any medical journal, and one of the foundations of sort of early virology was when Louis Pasteur discovered that rabies was present in animal spit. And what it does was it forms some sort of, like, it collects around your brainstem and spine and causes this bizarre behavior. But they were able to show through a series of repeatable experiments that anybody in the world can go and find online, and they can look at it and they can criticize it. And it's been there for over 150 years. Okay, you can see that basically, yeah, this is one of the mainstays of how zoonosis works. This is the passing of pathogens from animals to humans, and it happens. There's even bacteriological ones like the Great Plague. Like, so it's just again an absolute charlatan's nonsense that he's talking about. So what he basically says is they've never isolated this virus, which is a lie. He's just lying. Then what he says is, so the tests, they're not detecting the virus, they're detecting genetic material that is within you, which is also a lie, a provable lie, because as we say, the actual virus is available, the genome's available online. You can all go and check that paper, and you can all go and read the paper, and you can find fault with it, please, and then come back to a scientist. But this is what scientists do. Like, do you know how much credit you get in the science world to credibly go, you found a flaw in this, I'm the hero that's going to sort this out? That's how science works, and this just isn't happening. One of the things that he says,
I just want to make one point, right? Okay, yeah. You know when you say that something cannot pass between an animal and well, you know, there's this. Well,
that's what he says. He says that the virus. Yeah.
Yeah, and you give the example of a rabid dog get bitten by a rabid dog, but again, that's injecting something into you, isn't it?
Yeah, but he says that doesn't work. He says it doesn't matter if it's injected. There is no way it can pass from an animal. He's not saying that it has to be injected. He says there's no way that it can pass from an animal to a human.
Right. So if it were to pass from an animal to a human, it would have to be some sort of like a bite or some sort of.
Sometimes it can go into your eyes and mucous membranes. It depends on the type of virus or bacteria, basically. Like I say, with mosquitoes, for example, they bite you and give you malaria. But with other things, basically, you can just get it from like, you can get diseases from bat guano. That doesn't go into you. It goes in through your eyes and your ears and your mouth and through your mucous membranes. It doesn't go into your bloodstream. And even saliva, like with the case of rabies, doesn't have to go into your blood. It can go into your saliva as well. Because this is the thing, like some viruses are blood to blood, some are spit to blood, some are both. Like, and this is where it's going to come on to, basically, he says, well, there's no way of testing for these things with the PCR test, and the PCR test just tests for this genetic material, and that's just a flat out lie. And then he says that basically they give an 80% false positive. That's a flat out lie as well. It's just a complete lie. He's made that up. They actually give a 30% false negative, and the reason for that is because you either test in the nose or in the mouth. Okay, if you test in the nose and it's in the mouth, you missed it. If you test in the mouth and it's in the nose, similarly, you've missed it. Right? This is why in China they give 2 PCR tests, one in the nose, one in the throat, and then they do a CT scan as well.
No, I mean, even when you go into hospital and they give you a test for MMR, I mean, they do 3 up your nose, both nostrils, and in your groin.
Exactly.
So you would imagine that it would be a different test to the one that's just simply either up your nose or in your mouth.
Well, what it says is that basically there's a thing called the CT cycle threshold, and basically this is a signal that's given off from the actual pathogen, right? Okay, and he quite rightly says that anything more than a level of 45 is considered inconclusive because it's too much background noise. So ideally you want it 30. 30 is the gold standard. And what he says is that all the government tests, all these PCR tests are invalid, not only because they're not getting a virus, because this virus doesn't exist, we know that's a lie, but also because they have a CT cycle rate of 40, which is at the very top level. So it's like it's a vague test. So I checked the CDC website and the WHO website and checked the manufacturers, and every single one of them says that if it's got a CT value higher than 35, you throw it out. So again, what he's done there is he's lied. He's just lied. What he said is, oh, this number, in the hope that nobody will go and check it. But he hasn't. He's just lied. I imagine people are going mad in the chat room. They're going, the person who invented the PCR test himself said that these things aren't useful for a diagnosis. Yeah, he did. He absolutely did. That's Dr. Hildreth. He said this is, it's not useful for a diagnosis. He's talking about HIV. Now, here's the thing that you might know about HIV.
How do you know he's talking about HIV and not COVID-19? Because HIV is not quite on the agenda at the moment, but HIV.
Because this particular quote is taken from when HIV was being connected to AIDS.
Right, so it's an old quote. It's
30 years before this happened. So we can be fairly sure that he's not talking about COVID-19. Like, he's dead. Like, the bloke's been dead for like 10 years as well.
Well, that's what I wanted to know. I didn't want our listeners to be under the misapprehension that this guy has come out and said this yesterday, and when in fact it's been dead for a number of years.
He's the guy that invented the PCR test, and he basically has this quote where he says he's absolutely useless as a diagnostic tool, or words to those effects. And people have jumped on that and said, well, why are they using it? And they missed the context, that he's talking about HIV. And we know it's not effective for HIV because HIV is a blood-borne disease. It's not in the spit. You can't get it from kissing. You can't get it from toilet seats. You can't get it from sharing a glass, but you can get it from from serological fluid passing from one person to another. And so that is specifically what he's talking about. Now, the other thing that Dr. Kaufman says about this thing is that basically they're not picking up the virus, they're picking up what's called exosomes. And he says this because of another quote from Dr. Hildreth, where he says, this virus is an exosome in every sense of the word, right? and he puts up a chart that shows how viruses and exosomes have got exactly the same sizes, properties, etc., etc., etc. And therefore, what is happening is they're being mistaken. Could you please do me a favor and pop up are viruses exosomes?
Okay, listen, apparently we've got a doctor in the chat room who'd
Right.
like to come and which one did you say you wanted?
Are viruses exosomes?
Are viruses?
Can we leave questions to the end, please? I'm happy to do them, but like,
no, listen, I'm fine about that. That's not a problem at all. If you didn't want him to come on, that's not a problem for me. It's just the people in the chat room. They're not going
to check the stuff. They just want to prove me wrong because they've not checked it before, and now they're probably feeling a bit silly. But
well, this guy's claiming to be a doctor, but I mean,
right, of course, yes, yeah.
A lot of people are claiming to be a doctor. I mean, we're going to show. Just
tell me
again, please.
The season for it, Jason. It certainly seems to be the season for it. Whack on a white coat, tell people you're a doctor, and anybody will believe any old shit.
Okay, go on. Tell me the one you want. Sorry.
Right. Anyway, so sorry. Could you pop up the chart? Are viruses exosomes, please?
Oh, right. Are viruses exosomes?
Yeah.
I went straight to R. I've got it.
Right. So basically, now this is the actual truth, right? Okay. If you see, there's lots of differences. Basically, it's ridiculous. What he's done is he's thrown up these things and he's cherry-picked data from different examples of viruses and different examples of exosomes, and he's put it together. Now, why has he chosen exosomes? Because exosomes is a very, very sort of like unusual and obscure medical thing. We've only been aware of them for a relatively short period of time and only able to like photograph them for even less. What an exosome basically means is an excretion from a cell. And what he's saying is that basically these cells are excreting this genetic matter that every single person has in them. And that's what's being picked up by the test. And he's basing that on the concept that basically the virus has never been isolated. So it's obviously not true. And it's not how PCR tests work. And it's provably not true. And he makes a fundamental error in his in two things. Could you go to Kaufman exosomes COVID, please?
I certainly can. Let me just get rid of this one.
Person that says that you can't isolate or photograph viruses is going to come a cropper in a number of ways in a second, and it'll become clear.
Well, you know what I was going to ask. You know where people say you can't. A virus isn't a living thing. Now,
neither's a block of wood, but it can fucking hurt you.
Well, I mean, a block of wood's a living thing, isn't it?
Well, not after you've cut it down and varnished it.
Well, no. What I'm saying is that just because I saw an explanation and it said it's not a living thing because it's got no respiratory system.
Yeah, that's the point. It doesn't fit the what we would term as the definition of being a living thing. It requires a host to survive. I don't think it has. It has something missing that is considered fundamental for being considered a living thing. But strangely, it shows a will to survive, and it's intelligent. They adapt. They show a degree of evolution. This is how a virus mutates. And the reason that a virus mutates is because it wants to survive. Now, the other reason that a virus mutates is because this is why he's picked the word exosomes, right? Because how exosomes, some viruses use exosomes as a sort of Trojan horse. You've got these cells in you called MVEs, right? Okay. And what happens is a virus gets inside of you and it replicates that. It disguises itself as a cell in your body so that your immune system doesn't know what to do with it, and it spreads it through the body, sometimes through the use of exosomes. Herpesviruses, retroviruses, there's another type that my friend John Brisson would be able to tell me, but I can't remember off the top of my head. These are spread through exosomes because it's the Trojan horse nature of how a virus works. So what he's done is he's basically just picked out the most obscure word that he can find, and he's tried to to just bamboozle people in the hope that they won't bother to check and find out what these actually are. Could you pop up that picture?
Yeah, sorry, I'm just texting my wife downstairs.
Oh, that's all right.
She's the new moderator in the chat room tonight, so don't fucking...
She's got work cut out for us. Sorry, I'm so sorry.
No, she's don't worry about that. She's just watching and getting rid of anybody that I did tell. I'm not going to say.
So look at us causing fuss, Jason.
What I wanted to mention is when you say things, when you talk about viruses, there are certain people will have a herpes virus and will get a cold sore.
Yeah.
And certain people won't ever get one, no matter what. I mean, I've snogged that many birds that have got cold sores. You never really found out under lipstick, did you? So,
yeah.
I never got a cold sore. So,
but I embarrassingly nearly ruined a girl's life by giving her a cold sore. So, like, you know, it certainly can happen. Like, so yeah, it's terrible.
So right. So, where are we going here now? Then, which one is it?
Kaufman exosomes COVID, please. Now, this is the fundamental premise of his entire thesis, should you call it that or whatever.
Right, okay, got it. Yep. There we go. It just has to upload to the system and then we will show it. There you go.
Right, lovely. So what you can see on the left is what he's labeled as, exosomes. And you can see at the top, in the middle, on the sort of underneath the ES of exosomes, it's like a circular thing with a load of little dots all around it. Yeah. Okay. And what then on the right you can see COVID-19, and you can see COVID-19 with the arrow. There's a circle and then there's a series of dots around it. Okay. So what he's looked at those two photos and he's gone, they're exactly the same thing. Right. Now, there's a problem with this. Okay. The first major problem for this person who doesn't think that viruses exist, doesn't think that they can be transferred, doesn't think that they can be photographed, yada, 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 yada. On the slide on the left, those exosomes are being excreted from an Epstein-Barr virus. He just didn't bother to check. He just looked up exosomes and picked the first thing that he did and didn't realize that the actual picture that he uses to sell his argument actually disproves his whole argument. Okay, right. We don't need to go to the next one. He shows this picture, right? Okay, and it's
can I just, sorry, Neil, again, can I just say something? I mean, for me, that picture, if someone's telling me what that picture is, I'm going to have no reason to believe, because I've got no reference to what it could be at all.
Well, that's why you've got to go to the source article where he found it from.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. So this is how easy it is for this shit sort of to happen. Right, I will get rid of that anyway.
Could you then put up? Sorry, I'm a bit like pain. I'm all right, Snippy. So
you're not pain. Sorry, my lift's just coming up with a drink. I text my wife and said, "Can you send me a drink up, please?" And she said,
"Take a strong one." Could you put up COVID image, please?
Oh yeah, COVID image.
Okay, so what this is, to be fair, this isn't the exact same image. This is the same image, but the one that he uses is purple, because sometimes they just color these things in order to make them pretty. Now, what Andrew Kaufman says is that the dots, you see these four like big sort of dots there, bubbles we'll call them, and they've got like little dots around them. James, you see that, mate?
Sorry, yeah. Oh, the thing's on. I'm just getting.
Right. Okay. So basically, what Andrew Kaufman says, is that those four bubbles, they are actually they're mammalian cells. He says that they're human cells, and that what the dots around the edges of those bubbles are is COVID virus attacking it, which kind of goes against his previous thing that you can't isolate or see COVID virus. But let's not get bogged down with facts, because we'll be here all day, right? So The major problem with that is that that isn't the virus attacking a mammalian cell. That's the virus. That's 4 lots of the virus. The virus is comprised of that bubble thing in the middle, and then all those dots at the edge that he says are exosomes, they're not. They're the proteins that attach to the human cell in order to make the virus be able to replicate. So in the very, very most basic things, Dr. Andrew Kaufman gets it wrong. He gets it absolutely 100% wrong. Okay, why does he get it wrong, do we think? Well, I mean, could you be so kind as to put up Andrew Kaufman disciplined for stealing? You see, Andrew Kaufman's a psychiatrist, and he's got several sort of grifts to his thing. Like, he's basically claiming that, well, I used to be trained in biology and blah, 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 blah. And none of it adds up, because basically he's not able to, like, even if that was true, you're not able to be doing any experiments now. If you look for him on PubMed, he's never published a single document pertaining to medicine. Like, it's very sketchy as to what his actual background is. He seems to have got a medical degree in North Carolina, but he also seems that basically he was charged with the crime of embezzling money from his university. As you can see, what happened here, this is the North Carolina, where he was struck off because and this was before he'd actually even finished his medical license, right? So it's not clear whether he actually passed or not. What I think he did was go to Ohio, pass there, and then get struck off there. So, but I'll get to that. Sorry, I'm going ahead. What he did was basically in this, he was doing an experiment where anybody who participates get a $25 Amazon voucher. And rather than pay the people these vouchers, he just nicked it. He just nicked it for himself and went and bought loads of like TVs and shit like that off the internet. So this is a person of not particularly high moral fiber. After he was basically disciplined and, you know, charged with embezzlement, which is a crime in North Carolina, what he did was he went to Ohio, and he was struck off in Ohio as well. And then what he did was he moved to New York, where he basically retrained as a psychiatrist. And he does this really like sneaky, slimy grift where he says that he's associated with the University of Syracuse, New York, but he's not. He just rents an office there. So there's all these indicators that this bloke is basically just really shifting in everything that he actually does. He's lying about the isolation of the virus. He's lying about the tests. He's lying about the way that viruses work. He's got absolutely everything wrong with the basic facts that he's presenting with his thesis. He's got the picture of the virus wrong. He's got the understanding of exosomes wrong. He's just a liar and a fraud. He's just basically someone that's gone out there and he's said all this crap for attention and adoration, and probably to sell a book, and he probably got some sort of donation thing and come to my website and do this and blah 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 blah, and nobody's bothered to check. Absolutely nobody's bothered to check. And so everybody's repeating this shit that the virus isn't real because it's never been isolated, and the tests don't work because the virus isn't real, and that's provably not true.
What about some of the other people that are bandying these?
Oh, these guys, right? Well, let's go to Rashid Buttar next. Now, basically, Rashid Buttar essentially repeats the same things that Andrew Kaufman does. He does the what's it called? The death certificates, which I think we've covered. If you want to put up another one, I can show you an ICO2 one where it's underlying certificates. If you go death certificate I072 underlying conditions, please. Right, so this is a death certificate where basically they haven't been able to test them. They've not been able to test these people, but they strongly suspect that they've got COVID. And for the reasons that we discussed, which is perfectly sensible and reasonable, they decide to put this separate code on the death certificate. This isn't the number that's been reported, so there's no way that this can be used to hype up the figures. It's not being used to scare you because it's not being reported. Okay, so he basically says the same crap. He says that they're fiddling with the death certificates, which is provably untrue. Like, you can go through, I'll send you the link. Like, I've actually got them all here, but we haven't got time to go through every single example of how to fill out a death certificate. I actually bothered to look at, and not on a single one of them does it have COVID as the cause of death. So that's just a straw man. It's just a lie. It's just something that nobody's bothered to check. The other thing that he said.
So COVID-19 has been mentioned on death certificates, though, hasn't it?
Of course,
as an underlying cause as to what would have exacerbated the actual cause of death.
Yeah.
But people are seeing that, and then they're starting to.
They're assuming basically, look, if it's just tested positive, it still doesn't necessarily mean that that was actually the cause of death. So there's bound to be some reason, some deaths where the person got COVID but got hit by a car, say, and they're still going to add that to the COVID death, which is artificially inflating the numbers. And it's like, there may well be some people like that, someone who sneezed and fell out of a fucking window, or basically whatever. Okay. But you know what? There's a huge amount of people who aren't getting tested, who are dying still. As we said before, the only real thing that we can look at is worldwide at the minute, there's 250,000 extra deaths. Is that as bad as it might be? No. Is that a reason for us all to be terrified? No. Does it mean that we're all going to die? No. Does it mean that we should be really worried? No. Does it mean that I like the lockdown? No, it doesn't. But does it mean that the virus doesn't exist, or that the tests don't work, or that it's never been isolated, or that they're juking the stats? No, it doesn't. What the actual evidence shows is that the opposite is true. If they wanted to instill fear into you, they'd be showing you the higher figures. For some reason, they're going to incredible lengths in places like America and Brazil and in the UK to hide the true figures. That's what the evidence shows. Dispassionately looking at it, totally non sort of bias. That's what the evidence shows. The evidence shows that the actual death figure is higher than the figure that's reported on the news. So they can't be pumping the stats to pump fear through you, because otherwise they would use that. They've given themselves a mechanism so that they can distinguish between these two, and they're making sure to show you the lower figure, right? None of that falls in line with the concept or the theory that they are raising the figures artificially to scare you. If anything, what they're doing is they're hiding the number of people who've died due to their incompetence in the response. Because I'll say this again, these people didn't need to die, right? None of these people needed to die, right?
I just want to, let's just cut in. We're an hour and 22 minutes in, and a lot of people have been saying, as we expected, talking crap in chat room and saying all sorts of different things, and calling you names that are unwarranted, to be honest with you. But we're 122 minutes, and we've still got so much more to talk about.
Yeah,
we've still got so much more to talk about. But I wanted to actually make the point that you are not pro the lockdown. You're not afraid of this virus just because you've got a different opinion about how this virus is and whether it's alive or it's dead or whatever. You do not like the lockdown like everybody else. You want the lockdown stopped, and you're on our side. This is what gets me, is people fucking, what they do is they disagree with somebody on one single thing, and then they're on opposite sides, and they're adversaries. And this seems to have what has happened to a certain extent in our chat room tonight, and I've not liked it. And to be honest with you, since I've said something about it, I've had a look. It's nowhere near as bad, because we need. If you want to know that we're all supposed to be fucking truth seekers.
You don't
say
not you know, blindly believing any old shit. I tell you what, okay, go and check what I've said. Go and check what I've said, and you know what, if you find that it's wrong, then we'll have a discussion about it. But don't get cross, right? Because you listen to somebody and you've told other people that, and now someone's saying that can't be true. Respectfully, it can't possibly be true. Hang on, can we just pop up? Can we just like? Hang on. So who we go with? What were we saying? We're saying so. Dr. Buttar is who's the guy that everyone's pushing at the minute. He's basically repeating exactly the same lies that Andy Kaufman's putting up. Could you do us a favour and put up Dr. Buttar cancer?
Yep.
Now, what Dr. Buttar, who is not a medical doctor, by the way, he's an osteopath. He's a DO, which means that he's got a doctorate of osteopathy, which is brilliant. I'm not having a knock at basically alternative therapists or anything like that. I think it's fantastic and good for him for doing that. But he's not a virologist, and he's repeating the same tired lies that he's heard Andrew Kaufman say, which are provably not true. You can go through every single point that they've made and check it. Well, it's just not true. They're just making it up. But Dr. Rashid Buttar is exceptionally qualified. Look at this. He's a fellow of this organisation and a fellow of this organisation. You'll be saying, how dare you insult Dr. Buttar? And then you look into these institutions that he's a fellow of, right? Mate, it's funny. He's giving himself letters behind his name. Right, he's a fellow of about 6 or 7 different institutions, and then you look into
his own dinner, is it?
What? He made them. He's the only member of these institutions. Yeah, he made it up. He's an absolute charlatan and a liar. He dresses up in a white coat to make people think that he's a doctor and says wild shit in the hope that everybody goes, oh, he's such a freedom fighter. Oh, I love him. Look at him, he's handsome. Anyway, so what this is this is again in North Carolina. He bips around exactly like Andy Kaufman. Basically, what happened with Andy Kaufman is to say he went to North Carolina, got struck off there, went to Ohio, got struck off there, and now says some wild shit on the internet for attention. Dr. Buttar, this is one of 4 malpractice lawsuits that have been held against him throughout the years. Basically, he's a con man. What he does is he tells people who are dying of cancer that he's got these miraculous therapies, and he charges them thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds. Now, this is a particular lawsuit where 4 people that he offered, shall we say, alternative therapies for the treatment of cancer, he actually made their condition worse. They died. And when they died, he actually went to collection agencies to go to their widows or widowers and get extra money off of them. Could we go to Dr. Buttar Cancer 2, please?
Right, yep. Dr. Buttar Cancer 2. There we go, yep. It's uploading, and is that it?
Booyah. Okay, so basically what this is part of the same lawsuit where what he would do is he'd take these people who were dying of cancer and basically you'd keep upping the bill by saying we need to do this lab test and we need to do this lab test. And when you actually looked into the laboratory tests that he was carrying out, they were nothing to do with the treatment. He was basically just hiring out labs and then charging 3, maybe 4 times what the laboratory was charging him and taking this money off dying patients. Right, now, what do you think the treatments were that he decided were particularly good for treating people who were terminally ill with cancer? If we go to cancer, Dr. Buttar, Cancer 3.
Did he get this one off Trump?
Huh? Well, odd that you should say that. What he recommended and carried out was, oh no, that's the wrong one, that's Andrew Kaufman. What he recommended and carried out was intravenous injection of hydrogen peroxide into the bloodstream. And this is what you can see here. This is basically, he's told a woman who's got had a radical hysterectomy, chemotherapy and radiation all failed to halt the spread of cancer, which has spread to her liver and lungs. Dr. Buttar's treatment of patient A was to administer hydrogen peroxide intravenously. Patient A paid in excess of $12,000 to Dr. Buttar for initial fee. Over the next month, patient A would have 19 other office visits with Dr. Buttar and pay approximately $18,000, a total in excess of $27,000. The average cost of a patient's visit to Dr. Buttar was in excess of $1,000. Patient B was treated by Dr. Buttar for a period of 2 months from April 2004 to June 2004. During this 2-month period, Dr. Buttar charged patient B in excess of $30,000 for ineffectual therapies that included injections of intravenous vitamins and other substances, chelation therapy, and dimethylcaptopropane sulfonate, an EDTA, filter infant respiratory reflex procedure, and ONAMED biofeedback. Prior to her death, patient B paid Dr. Buttar over $10,000. Dr. Buttar sought collection from patient B's estate for the remaining balance of his charges, which approximated a further $19,000. Dr. Buttar charged patient cover $32,000 for treatments he knew to be ineffectual after patient C's widow cancelled a $6,700 check made out to Dr. Buttar. Dr. Buttar referred patient C's account to a collection agency. The amount that Dr. Buttar sought from patient A's widow exceeded $25,000, which included the unpaid portion of the bill and a 25% collection fee. Right? That's the person that you're championing. So all you people who are in the chat room, you think, oh, no, but Dr. Buttar, but Neil's a shill. Like, you really, really should have checked that, because now basically you're just supporting a terrible, terrible person that preys on the dying. Own it, mate, own it. We could have talked about it nicely. Now you've got to own it. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we listen, mate. I'm the sort of person that's that I listen to both sides. Right? I have my own.
Ideas. Like, you know, when people are like obvious charlatans is telling you shit on the internet, the thing is to do is check it. The thing isn't to do is to get really cross and bitchy and snippy, because when somebody does check it and they prove it with facts, with the actual physical documents, the source documents, and they make you feel, you get that horrible feeling like that, oh no, I've made a fool of myself. Now the adult thing to do would be to go, all right, fair enough, let's reappraise this with looking at new things. So it looks like some people perhaps haven't done that. That's a shame. Hey, I'll give a shit. Let's move on.
Listen, mate, you've got as many advocates. We've got great numbers tonight.
Should we go on for Dr. Shiva now? Oh, let's go for the hat trick. Dr. Shiva.
Dr. Shiva, and then
Dr. Shiva is exactly the same. He says exactly the same shit, repeats the same lies, okay? And he's not a doctor. He's got a PhD. His speciality is now. Here's what's really, really ironic about this, right? Okay, because the same people that love Dr. Shiva, I guarantee all of you are the same people that hate Neil Ferguson for his stupid computer models, his silly computer models that said 500,000 are going to die. Don't you? Admit it. Just admit it. Please just admit it, because I know it's true. That's what Dr. Shiva does. That's what he does. He does computer modeling. He does computer modeling, which is exactly the same thing. So people, again, have just not bothered to check it. He's a charlatan. He's an idiot. His main claim to fame is that when he was 14, he invented email. He didn't. You know, that always reminds me of my father would drink, he would lie, he would tell outlandish tales like he invented the question mark. Like, come on, you can check who invented email. It wasn't him. Now, let's just skate over the fact that Dr. Shiva recommended curing COVID by taking a hairdryer and putting the hot end to your mouth and blasting hot air into your lungs. Let's just skate over that, right? Because that's too stupid for words. That's the man that you're advocating, that you're getting shitty about right now, right? Because you go, no, you fucking didn't. Yes, he did. Yes, he did. You just didn't check, right? Anyway, so Dr. Shiva, when he was pretending to have invented email, what happened was there was a couple of magazines that basically put out articles saying, that's not true, it's not even remotely true, you're a liar, we can check this, you know, you did nothing of the sort. And these two magazines were Gawker and Techdir, and he decided to sue both of them. Now, This might be considered guilt by association, but I think we have to look at this sort of stuff, because if people are putting out pictures of Dr. Fauci stood next to Bill Gates, or Bill Gates next to Epstein, and go, see, it proves they're a bastard, fine, that's fine. But just like everyone was using the ONS stats to show that we're inflating the figures, and when you actually look at the stats, that's not what it shows at all. You've got to stay with those stats. That's the rules. You made the rules. You said we're looking at these stats. You cannot change your mind just because the stats don't show what you wanted to show anymore. Sorry, it's just gutting, isn't it? Anyway, so Dr. Shiva, on this particular lawsuit against Gawker, his co-defendant on the lawsuit was Peter Thiel.
That's the one we were talking about on the. I watched that a couple of nights ago. That actual documentary on Netflix. And they absolutely destroy Gawker.
Yeah.
And you can tell because the judge is completely paid off. And Stone Cold, well, not Stone Cold, Hulk Hogan, whose sex tape it were, said that it wasn't Hulk Hogan that was embarrassed by the sex tape, or it was
whatever he's marrying or whatever his
fucking name were. And they got it as well, and they absolutely destroyed Gawker. Yeah, and that guy, I mean, the gay guy, the gay billionaire guy, weren't it, who were behind it?
Well, yeah, he was CIA. He works for Incotel. He's the person behind PayPal, and was actually influential in the start of Facebook and other social media. But yeah, he's CIA through and through. And basically, he's co-defendant on Dr. Shiva's lawsuit. Come on. There was another lawsuit against Tech Dirt, and basically that's another magazine. He's co-defendant. You know who paid for his defense on that? Koch Industries. So he's in with Peter Thiel, the CIA, and Incotel, and Koch Industries. Koch Industries are very heavily involved in Heritage Foundation, which is a CIA-run think tank, and the Atlas Network, which is, even today, apparently, they've sent one of Donald Trump's ex-bodyguards, and this will be to do with the Atlas Network. You should really read my blog to try and foment a coup in Venezuela, but let's not get sidetracked. The other thing about Dr. Shiva is that basically he's connected to Pfizer. What he's basically trying to do is get his computer modeling data, project that he's done, like system, I don't know what the fuck you call it, and basically he wants to sell it to Pfizer in order for them to do drug testing in a sort of AI way rather than in a than on animals and stuff like that. And it won't work because the problem is that basically China insists on it. And if you want to trade with China, you have to do animal testing. It's just a thing that you have to do, I'm afraid. So basically, again, Dr. Shiva is a total fraud. Now, here's the big killer, this guy that's connected to the CIA and Koch Industries, you know, the very elites, the deep state, you might say, because that's who they are. He's also running for a seat on the Senate in Massachusetts, and as a Republican, and he's incredibly pro-Trump. So anybody that basically takes a step back and looks at this sees it's really obvious what Dr. Shiva's actually trying to do. He's just running interference for Donald Trump, because basically a lot of people are quite rightly saying people didn't need to die in these numbers. You've handled this very, very badly, Donald Trump, because basically you tried to save the economy rather than actually stepping up and helping your citizens, the people who voted you. Same with Boris Johnson, same with Bolsonaro. And so you've got people like Dr. Shiva who are out there who just basically, they just want to throw this, it's called running interference. They just want to change the conversation away from it's Donald Trump's fault to anything else, anything at all. It's not as bad as all that. It doesn't exist. It must be something else, blah, blah, blah. As we said before, everyone's going to move on to, they're murdering them in hospitals. And the reason they're going to move on to this is because basically they can't explain the rise in deaths, and rather than be adult about it and basically go, shit, we need to reappraise this because we've got new data, which is fine. That's how data works. You get something new and you go, oh, well, perhaps this changes the way that we should look at it. Rather than that, they're going to go, well, I can't have been wrong, so there must be another explanation for it. The nurses are murdering them in their thousands. Do we really think that 250,000 extra people have been murdered by nurses in the past 3 months? It's a bit far-fetched, isn't it? I don't know. It doesn't sit quite right with me. And then the fourth doctor that we've got, okay, this is Judy Mikovits. And she's just, again, she's just a liar. Basically, she can't get her story straight either. She can't decide whether her whole thing is this thing called XMRV, right, which she thinks is in vaccines and is causing breast. She originally thought that it was the thing that caused certain types of cancers, right? And now she says that basically it's the thing that's causing COVID. And she says two things that completely contradict one another. One, that it's in vaccines, and two, that it's actually caused by people coughing it out. People have got these XMRVs in them from previous vaccines and they're coughing out. It's like, well, fucking which one is it? Like, come make up your bastard mind. Anyway, this is all nonsense. What happened was now she's got a personal grudge against Fauci because to an extent, Fauci got her fired, but she got herself fired. What she did was she did this experiment, which was quite a high profile experiment with a lot of people looking for, and she decided that XMRV was the cause of certain cancers. And she was massively, massively like happy about this. You know, it's a big breakthrough. And the problem was when she was asked to repeat the experiment, nobody could get the same results. And several people who wrote the paper with her looked at it and went, shit. We've made a real silly error here. We've contaminated it there. The whole, sorry guys, we've messed up. We're ever so sorry. The experiment was a mistake. It was a failure, and she didn't buy that. So now here's the thing that she never tells you, because what she tells you is she was arrested and she was kicked out of her job, and all because she exposed this thing with vaccines. And none of that's true. She did that paper. It came out that this paper was false. The paper was retracted. She was given another chance to do the experiment again, and she did it on her own. Nobody messing with her. She tried the experiment again. And you know what she found? She found that she couldn't repeat the original result. That basically the evidence showed that sadly the initial experiment was corrupted in some way. These things happen. What any normal person would have done was go, all right, fair enough, never mind, get on with your job. What she did instead was kick up a stink and steal office equipment. She was arrested for stealing office equipment, and obviously she was fired because of that. And she blames Fauci, who was the head of her department. I'm not a fan of Fauci. Like, I think Fauci's as corrupt as the rest of them. But that's,
we're going to get that all the way. You're going to get that, aren't you? You're going to get people on one side that do things wrong, and then you get people on the other side that do things wrong. Now, on the side of humanity, we are both on the side of humanity, I would imagine. The work that you've done, your thoughts are not your own, volumes 1 and 2, and this book here as well. Which we were going to give away as a prize tonight, but I couldn't think up of a question.
Well, I give one away. Like, if people want it, I imagine some people might want it just to spit on it in the chat room. But you know, if you want to do that, you do what you like.
Well, listen, I'm not very happy with. I'm a bit disappointed with the chat room. I've got to say, I mean, people have got to. They've got to put their what they're married to, their beliefs aside, and be able to have a look at another side. Because if you don't, you're never going to find out the truth, because you're just going to have one thing. I've got 2 pages here of stuff that I wanted to look. In fact, I've got 3. I've got, when we were talking today, I was taking notes, and I've got 3 pages, well, 2 and a bit pages of stuff that I wanted to get to, and I've not been able to get to any of them.
Well, we can do that now if you like, man, because I've pretty much like that's it. That is the gist of it. That's the gist of it. What's happened, and nobody seems a bit curious about this. You've got like 4 people who've appeared out of bloody nowhere and has all of a sudden gone viral all over the place, and nobody sat and questioned like, well, how have these people got like such prominence so quickly? Shall we check what they're saying to see if what they're saying is true? Shall we check their background and character to see if these people are obvious grifters? Like, and people just haven't. And I get it, right? Because there's a massive distrust in the government and everything that comes out of the government's mouth and everything. And basically, they've been caught out in the past. And so when this happened, everybody said, well, this is, I get the angle, it's a fake, isn't it? It's a hoax. They're going to do it to sort of lock us down, or they're going to do it to introduce a vaccine, or they're going to introduce a microchip or a tracking program. I just want to say, so I'm not downloading the fucking app. I'm not getting the vaccine. Like, they can piss off. Like, and I'm opposed to all that. And I'm opposed to all the laws that come in as well. Now, the thing
let me get some of these going. Yeah, I've got this thing. I think you've had a joint, haven't you? Yeah, and you get really talky when you've had a joint. And there's things.
Yes.
Like I said, there's things I wanted to ask you on this here. But I wanted to just go to something in the chat room. Richard Ratcher says, and you haven't asked a thing. Look, I've got a guest on. I've invited this guest on for his opinion. Now, I have asked questions in certain places, but I wanted the flow of the conversation to go as this is Neil. Nobody's listening to this to listen to me. This is people who listen to this to listen to Neil. And if you, no matter what shit you put in fucking chat room, you're still here and you're still fucking listening. And then you know.
I'll answer questions like just be.
I just wanted to get onto one of these things, one or two of these things that I got written down. First of all, we were talking about London Real.
Yeah.
Before
it's London Real now. Yeah, he's a grifter again. Brian Rose is an absolute grifter. Now, there's something very weird, and I can't decide if this is true or not. So this is the thing. You'll notice I'll do this. If I'm not sure about something, I'll tell you. Like, there's a suggestion that London Real, and I don't know if this is true, is owned or financed by the Russian billionaire Eugene Levsky, who also runs The Spectator. And I'm not sure whether that's accurate, because basically he runs London Live, and London Real is hosted on London Live, but I don't know if they're connected. But that is something that's flown about. So if anybody knows whether that's true or not, I'd love to know. I don't think it is, to be quite honest, but that's what I've heard before. Anyway, Brian Rose, he's got a grift on as well. He used to do a pyramid scheme. He's been caught doing pyramid schemes before. He's an ex-Wall Street banker, and for some reason he's left the millions of Wall Street, because now I want to jog around London and get sweaty and build an army. And he's like the obvious grift is he's doing like a Tai Lopez thing. Basically, he's got this sort of business course. If you go to the reviews, he says he's got a 96% pass rate, and it hasn't. It's got something like a 40% pass rate, and it's incredibly expensive, and it's shit. It's pointless. It's one of these. Do you want to know how to be a millionaire? Send me £1,000 and I'll tell you how to be a millionaire. And I'll tell you now, like I'll just give you the cheat sheet if you want. You get several, like you get 1,000 people to send you £1,000. It's as simple as that. That's what you do, and you too will be a millionaire, my friend. Right, that's literally the extent of his grift. But what the real sort of grift that he's doing at the minute is he's just being controversial. He knew that having David Icke on it would get it banned, because he knew that Ofcom would come out the day before and says, you talk about this and you'll get banned. And he knew that David Icke was going to talk about this particular subject. Now, I'm not one for banning things at all, right? Okay, but this reminded me, I'm a big fan of black metal, and there's a band called Marduk who I'm a massive fan of, and I think they're fucking apes, right? Okay, but they use Nazi imagery. They're not Nazi. They use Nazi imagery because they want to upset people, because that's sort of what black metal is about. It's kind of like punk, where Sid Vicious would wear a swastika. He wasn't Nazi. He's friendly with fucking Don Letts, for God's sake. But he wanted people to be upset, because that's the point. I'm making an impact. I'm making a statement. I'm doing something to like upset that, like, take that, the man, take that, the status quo. Now, you can't get angry when people react. If you want a reaction, what happened with Marduk was they went to California and people went, we don't want this Nazi band, you can fuck off. And they stopped the shows. I don't agree with that for a second. I don't think you should have stopped the shows. But you can't get upset when people react to the provocation that you did. That was what you wanted to do. You wanted to elicit a response. You wanted to upset people. You can't get upset when you've upset people. like, because that was what you were trying to do. And this is exactly the same thing that he's trying to do, really, because he's had Kaufman on, and he's had, if you watch that Kaufman episode back as well, you'll notice that Kaufman's reading, because he doesn't know what he's talking about. He's just picked all this crap up off the internet and he's reading it from a script. He's not versed in the shit that he's talking about. He's worse than me. This is the point. I'm not an expert, and even I've been able to look it up and go, there's some really, really basic flaws in the methodology and the logic of what they're saying. Like these documents, again, wind this back and read all these documents. I've not come here empty-handed, right? Okay, came here to you know, show you these guys are frauds. These are absolute provable frauds.
When you talk about people reading from scripts, I've got to say I have noticed you doing that. You know, you have things written down. Just to be fair, and I also know Richard D. Hall, who's another. But I'm not
pretending to be a doctor or a scientist, am I? That's why I've got notes to make sure that I'm being absolutely 100% correct with the details and the data that I've checked, right? Okay. If you're a doctor that knows this, you don't need to be like doing it. It's just another indication.
I don't know though. I mean, how many doctors have you been to, and I don't know, you've got like an ingrowing toenail, and then suddenly they've got a book out to look at what they need to prescribe you for an ingrowing toenail. You know. There are times where people do need to have.
You're absolutely right. That's a very fair point. But there is a difference between checking up the minutiae and reading the mainstay of your premise, which is supposed to be the thing that you know about. Well, put it this way: you asked me about Charles Manson. I won't need to check notes because that's my thing, isn't it? Right? Okay. I need to check notes on this to make sure that I'm accurate because this is very brand new to me. And I'm not pretending to be an expert in any shape or way or form. I'm pretending to be someone that's pretty good at finding documents and reading them and figuring out what they actually say. That's what I do. Okay. So there is a difference. It's just another indication that this is staged, that there's an element of management to this, and this person isn't perhaps as free and easy with the facts as would be indicated by what he is presenting to the world as the image which is behind this narrative. That's the point. Like, so yeah. What were we talking about? I've totally lost the thread.
Well, that's the good thing, because that means we whatever comes next is going to be fucking gold dust. I did notice though.
No, you were asking me questions and stuff, weren't you? Sorry, yeah. And,
yeah, there were a few questions, but I wanted to ask. About that picture behind you. It's.
I knew you were going to bring this up.
Lucas and Otis Toole.
It looks like it's my dad and my uncle. No, it's not. I'm joking. Like, it's I'm into like weird shit, as you can probably tell. This is my living room, by the way. This is my living room with my autographed picture of Henry Lee Lucas and Otis Lee Toole. Like, it's just the thing that I think, you know, really ties the room together.
Cannibal killers, yeah.
Yeah. And an ex-girlfriend. I was so incredibly stoked. It's a fantastic present. Like, it was right up my alley. I've got you the autographs of these serial killers, and so I proudly display it in my living room. I've got Arthur Shawcross over there. I've got H.W. Mullin over there. I've got a piece of Charles Manson's underwear over there. I've got a letter from Charles Manson over there. I've got a ring over there that's made of human bone from someone that died in the killing fields. I've got a dagger that was buried at the a bayonet that was buried at the Somme. I've got an autographed card from O.J. Simpson. I like shit like that. Huh?
And I've got Chris Waddle behind me there, look.
Oh, I've met Chris Waddle. Chris Waddle was my favourite player.
And that one's me. That one's me. Yeah.
Oh, is it? Oh shit, it is you.
That is me, and that's my daughter.
Oh, lovely.
And that's 2000. I think about 2003 when I had her. I wanted to ask you about. There was something else I wanted to ask you about, and somebody put it on, and because I've had probably as much weed as you have, my mind's gone all a blank. But people were when we talk about, Right, I want to get. We've got about. Well, we've got as long as we fucking want, really. We'll
Yeah, I can go
until it comes to an end. Well, let's talk about the government's response to it. How would you say the government's response to it is? Do you think that this response that we've had from the government is is it part of some sort of plan, or is it that they've just fucked it up? Because I mean,
right.
There are places that have not got any of this shit, aren't there?
Well, the thing is, like, very, very early on, like in February, Boris Johnson was making speeches, excuse me, where he said basically he won't be afraid by this virus. He will be the Superman, excuse me. He'll be the Superman that basically goes into the, like Clark Kent, I'll go into the telephone box and come out as the Superman that will save free exchange. And basically what he's saying is the business won't stop. Don't panic, big business. I'm gonna help you. We're gonna save the economy. And then what happens is that basically Dominic Cummings, it comes out that he's come up with this concept of herd immunity, and he doesn't care if old people die, people who basically got like underlying conditions, people on benefits, poor people, people with not access to great social care, and pensioners. Doesn't matter if they die, we've got to save the economy, and that's basically the whole point of it. This is denied, but it's denied in such a way that you know that it's real, because there were several scientists that basically supported this and who were on this SAGE thing, and the government turned around and says, no, this isn't true, we're totally supporting this, we're following the science, that's all we're doing, we're following the science. And then it comes out that the head of this science board is fucking Dominic Cummings. Vote leave, he's like Benedict Cumberbatch, he's basically connected to Cambridge Analytica, data mining and that type of thing, and using your data to manipulate you and to like mind control you, for want of a better expression. And yeah, basically what happened recently was that it came out that there was a leaked story to Bloomberg that was so obviously fake that because they got caught out that Dominic Cummings was at this SAGE meeting, and they got caught out that he'd said this herd immunity. So they leaked a story that said actually it was Dominic Cummings that was insistent that we had the lockdown. It was him that was insistent about the lockdown. And this is provably not true, because basically they fucked about for about 3 to 4 weeks. If they'd have gone to the lockdown 3 to 4 weeks prior to when they should have done, like they did in Eastern Germany, and close the airports and get adequate testing and PPE and ventilators for NHS staff, we wouldn't have had this problem at all. It would have been done, dusted, and we'd be going back to work. Like, I mean, this is a bit of a like. I mean, they have actually said that basically they're looking at relaxing it sometime between May 26th and June the 1st, which kind of knackers up all the theories that the whole point of this is to maintain the lockdown.
Somebody said that. Do you think that the lockup is a good idea then at the moment?
It's a good. Well, yes and no, because you cannot argue with the fact that basically in places where they lock down harder, quicker, and with more discipline, that basically it's all sorted now. Vietnam, New Zealand, Germany, for example. But on the other hand, they've not done it well, because they've not given any provisions for anyone's economic safety or anyone's mental health or any indication of when this would end or any clear messaging. So whilst
but perhaps they would argue that the situation came upon them so quickly that they had no chance to put those provisions in place.
Well, I mean, there is an argument to that, but other countries have managed it, and there's still the
which countries are having the just tell me which countries are having the best lockdown, not the ones that aren't having lockdown. You know, like Sweden not having lockdown, Belarus are not having lockdown.
No, here's the thing, right? Okay. Japan kind of did have a lockdown. They're in a state of emergency. We discussed this earlier, but basically, like, Belarus is a fucking communist dictatorship. I won't believe them as far as I could fucking throw the entire country. Like, it's nonsense. Oh, that shocked you because you thought I was a massive lefty, and yet I don't like communist dictatorships. I'm so enigmatic. Anyway, Yeah, so it's difficult, isn't it, basically, because like there's different methods and different ways of dealing with it. But I strongly believe that there's no reason, absolutely, comrade, there's no reason for the amount of people to have died in America and the amount of people who've died in England and the amount of people that died in places like Brazil, essentially. Like Spain was badly managed and Italy was badly managed, but that's because their infrastructure's piss poor, and they're in debt. And like there's a similarity again with the NHS, to be quite honest. You cannot ignore the fact that basically the NHS has been systematically fucked over the last God knows how long, essentially probably since the 1980s, with like defunding it, not properly providing equipment. This was not this was a thing before this extra burden was put on top of them. Like, do you know what I mean? And so it's just one of these things where, to me, again, looking at it from the outside, it looks like particularly the UK government have just gone, we can give a shit. Like, if some pensioners die, it's good because we don't have to pay them the pension anymore. Like, look at the people that are basically dying. And again, I'll reiterate this, none of these people need to die. There's poor people, ethnic minorities to a degree, people who are on benefits because they've got long-term sickness, and pensioners. And so, I mean, if you wanted to be really, really cruel about this, essentially, you've just like got rid of a massive problem to do with NHS funding and to do with the pension shortfall. And there's other problems out there. I'm not saying that, like, there's economic problems that they're going to tax us to shit over. I'm not stupid, but you could envisage the scenario where certain people have gone, this is a price that we're willing to pay. And that to me is horrific, like really horrific.
It is. Yeah, we all agree with that. And the sooner the lockdown ends, the better. I know you're in quite a good place because you've got like countryside both sides here. You're not likely to run into any coppers or PCSOs. And you could say, you were just like a canal side murderer, just going about the normal business, and they'd probably let you on your way. If you said
luckily I'm known for my prior canal side murders, so yes, that excuse absolutely works. Right, let's just get into the really, really horrible grist of it. Right, okay, now.
Right, I wanted to talk about, because we talked about before. I wanted to talk about all these videos of hospitals that are empty, and the videos of the dancing nurses, whether they are nurses or not. They're certainly in nurses' uniform, and they've certainly got medical equipment behind them. I don't know what's your take on that?
I totally understand.
We talked about that ticket, didn't we? We tried to get into ICU.
Right, okay. The nurses, the TikTok thing. I get it. When people are like, I really need to get this lump checked, and they're seeing people dancing around like twats. Stop it. Just stop it now. Please just stop all the TikTok dances. We understand why you're trying to let off steam. You're scared, whatever. I can see why you did it. Fucking just stop it now.
But you would have thought that the hospitals, the NHS trusts would have stopped that in the first place. As soon as it started happening, they would have stopped that, because it's giving the wrong
it gives the wrong impression, and that's not the optics of it are appalling. But who is to say that there wasn't a government minister that went, go on, put that out, put that on the news, do this, because it gives a positive image. We've got this blitz spirit, come on, dun, 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 dun. And it's like, it's bollocks, isn't it? It's like the clapping. I'm violently opposed to the fucking clapping, right? And I think that the NHS deserve all the praise that they should get. They deserve all the praise that they should get. But you know what would be more effective than fucking clapping? Because it's trite and offensive and insulting. Why not pay them like a competitive wage? Why not actually provide for them? Why not grind them into the fucking dust when they're junior doctors? Why not like set it up so that you can privatize it for people like Richard fucking Branson and people like that? Why not adequately serve these people who are on the fucking front line? right? Okay, to me, clapping for the nurses who have been systematically underfunded and abused over the years is like if I raped a girl and then my mate went up and went, "You only did it because she thinks you're pretty." That's not a fucking that's not a compliment, right? That's an insult. And that is exactly what this clapping is doing. And all it serves to do
is this platform designed? And look,
it's there to shift the blame, to shift the conversation from why the fuck are the government not sorting this out to, oh, the NHS are very good indeed. And you can't argue with that. But it's called
these TikToks things that they're doing and these dancers are having an adverse effect on the way that nurses are perceived. So, well, what I'm asking you is are we being set up so that we suddenly one day we realise that we're standing and we're clapping on the front door because we've got no fucking food in house? We're clapping the people that are allowed to go to work. You know, and then is there then going to be, like you've already said,
NHS? Yes, probably. I think there will be. But they're setting it up so that the NHS are the fall guys because they failed to save this person's life, or they failed to do this. It's already started with this idea that basically nursing homes and people are not getting the medication. And I'm not stupid. Again, I appreciate that there's some examples where people are not getting operations and stuff like that. But to suggest that basically nurses have abandoned their morals and their principles and everything that they've held dear, this is why they go into these jobs, like, is borderline offensive. Like, and I think the government is doing it. And I think certain people in the alternative media are doing it to basically explain away the death toll that they can't explain away any other way, because apparently, according to them, this virus doesn't exist. So it can't be the virus that's killing them. It must be something else that's killing them. And it's not, is it? It's the virus that's killing them. It's really obvious. And
it's not the virus, as we've said before. It's not the virus.
No, but the virus creates the circumstances where people die.
It's like putting gas into a car. It's going to run. Right, if you got no gas in car, he's not going to. You put really bad analogy. Without the virus there, the person wouldn't have died at that point of that particular illness. Illness, right? So the virus is helping. It's a conduit. One of your favourite words, I think.
Yeah, I don't wish to appeal to like sympathy or anything like that, but it's like my friend's nan who caught COVID and died from pneumonia, right? Okay. Yes, she was old. Yes, old people die, but there was nothing to suggest that this particular lovely old lady was going to die. Like, she had some years left, and those years were taken away from her. So this idea that basically, well, these people would have died anyway. Everyone is going to die anyway. Like, how completist do you want to be in that statement? It's just silliness. But yeah, let's go on to like the hospitals, and like we will sort of wrap up with that. That I think is a good way to sort of to do it. Film the Hospitals was started by Jason Jones. Jason Jones happens to be a member of this think tank that I've written about. I've written a book about it and a blog about it. You can get it on an audio book as well. It's called the CNP, which is the Council for National Policy. And the long and short of it is it's populated by the Kochs and the Mercers and Steve Bannon and Kellyanne Conway and Mike Pence. And what it is, it's a think tank that comprises of born-again Christian, far-right, born-again Christian, far-right billionaires, basically. And they hate fucking everything, everything that isn't rich, white, Christian, and them essentially. And it's very strange that this person from this particular organisation started to film the hospitals. And the film the hospitals thing was always stupid. It's like, of course the fucking car park's empty, right? Okay, they've told people to stay away. This is the problem. This is where these two theories are going to coincide, because basically, I thought that if people are dying in hospitals and care homes and being killed by like nurses, well, I thought that the hospitals were empty. So these two things don't seem to add up. So basically, you're going to see a shift away from that quite soon, and people pretending that they never said that the hospitals were empty, and they were just reporting what was on the news, like fucking Alex Jones did with Sandy Hook. But I digress. The whole point of that is, again, to pour scorn on this idea, this concept that the virus is actually that serious. And I hate to say this, but the only reason they're doing that is, again, to deflect blame from Donald Trump, right? Because the CNP is the think tank that Donald Trump had to audition in front of before he was allowed to be the candidate. The CNP is also financed directly, well, not directly, it's through the Unification Church of Sun and the Moon, but they're a CIA front, a proven CIA front. And they finance the CNP, which means the CIA finance the think tank that got Donald Trump elected. So if you think Donald Trump is fighting the elites or fighting the deep state, is just provably, again, not true. He was put into power by the deep state, also with the help of Mossad and their Black Cube internet device, and MI6 and MI5 with their Cambridge Analytica, which is a weapon. It's a weapon of MI5. It's under export control. It's got a list X clearance, which means that basically it's above top secret, and it has to be checked out by members but essentially by members of parliament before it's allowed to be used. And yet this thing was used to get Donald Trump elected, which proves beyond a shadow of a doubt, I don't care if you like it or not, Donald Trump was elected. And Brexit, this like, oh, the comments. And Brexit was also utilised Cambridge Analytica. So I don't care whether you support Brexit or not. That's not the argument. The argument is that basically the device that was utilised to make sure that the Brexit vote came through as a yes, we want to leave the EU, was a weapon of British intelligence. Which means that British intelligence wanted you to leave the EU. Like, I don't trust British intelligence. I don't trust the EU either. So it's a bit of a, but that's the point. Anyway, what was I getting on to? Right, the point being that two things have happened, right? One, we've seen these anti-lockdown protests in America. And again, I'm not telling you what to do. If you want to go out, go out. It's not my place to tell you. And I totally get everyone's frustration. I totally get the arguments. But you find out that these anti-lockdown protests were arranged by the DeVos family and by the Koch brothers. Okay, so again, these are members of the CNP, members of the Heritage Foundation, also by the Heritage Foundation. And again, like you can, like, I've got the links. You could message me. I'll prove it to you. Go on my Facebook page, read the articles. I'll absolutely 100% prove it to you. I'll prove it on a fucking Etch-a-Sketch. Like, basically, the people behind these go back to work protests are strangely the elites of these think tanks. And these think tanks have spent the last 40 years undermining workers' rights and lowering wages and reducing corporate oversight and reducing environmental oversight and reducing all of these things that are beneficial to the people. And now you think that they're not interested. They're not doing this. Okay, this is the best way of explaining it. They are not organising these anti-lockdown protests to help small business. They're telling you that's what it's for, but they're not. They're doing it to help big business because that's what they are. They're using you as canaries in a cage. They just want to maintain their profits. They just want to keep constant fucking tick over. They give a shit if you die. That's it. It's as straightforward as that. They don't give a shit if you die. You want more proof? Could you be so kind? Oh, I'm going to ask for a picture. Could you please pop up? Refuse a job and lose benefits, either of those. This is a new thing that's basically been put through by Donald Trump as part of the CARES Act. What happened was this a meat packing plant, I think it's called Tyler Waterloo, but I may be completely wrong, and people started refusing to go to work there because 20 employees had died. Like, hundreds of people had caught COVID and 20 employees had died. This is because basically there's no safety. They're all packed in there. They're very poor people who basically would also otherwise be on welfare. They've got no other choice but to go to work. Now, three things have happened. Donald Trump has issued this thing, which you can see. This is South Carolina. God, we're always in South Carolina. It's like, what? Nothing finer. But anyway, this is the Department of Work, and this is a federal act that's come through the care department. Individuals who've turned down offers of suitable work are not eligible for unemployment benefits during that week. If you've offered an individual a job and they refused it, it's important for you to report the incident to the DEW through your employer's self-service portal. What this means is, if you say, I don't want to work there because I don't want to die, or I don't want to catch this and potentially pass it on to my mum who's got an underlying condition, you're not eligible for benefits. The American government is forcing people to go in places where it's dangerous or potentially dangerous. And there's two further points to that. He's introduced the Defense Procurement Act. And the Defense Procurement Act is basically forcing these meatpacking plants and other ones to remain open against the advice of scientists and against the advice of the people that work there. So these places are being forced to be open by the federal government, signed by an executive order by Donald Trump, which is a wartime act. And if these people refuse to go there, okay, because they're frightened, they don't get any benefits. They don't get any welfare. They don't get this £1,200 one-off check. They don't get anything. They don't get food stamps. They got Medicaid. They don't get anything. Right? Okay. Well, Medicaid. Let's touch on that. We might as well while it's in here. A lot of people, but that's appalling. That's absolutely appalling. And further to that, basically, Mitch McConnell is forcing through legislation that says companies are not liable through insurance. So if you get ill or you die whilst working for these companies, you don't, it's not the company's fault. You get nothing. There's no life insurance. There's no nothing. There's absolutely nothing. Like, I think actually due to dead peasants policy, the company can actually claim for your death, but you can't, or your family can't. And that's just fucking ridiculous. It's just, that's Orwellian levels of irresponsibility, and that's the real conspiracy that everyone seems to be missing. Right? Okay, you've got three countries everywhere with these basically right-wing governments that are all coincidentally put in by the Heritage Foundation and the CNP and the mechanisms that they utilize, which is the CIA and MI5. It's in these countries. It's in these countries where you're seeing a total disregard for the safety of the citizens, because it's a far-right capitalistic expression of government, and they give no shits about you. This is basically the concern. And again, I don't know if everyone's going to have been cross. I don't know if people are thinking, but again, listen, go back and listen. Like, if you think I've lied about anything, then call me up on it. I haven't. I've shown you the source material. I've shown you how 4 people are grifting on you. I'm showing you how people have misunderstood the data. I'm showing you the facts. Okay. I've got nothing to gain from this, absolutely nothing to gain from this, other than what I've been seeing. It's been pissing me the fuck off, because it's at best irresponsible and at worst fucking dangerous, right? I have to be honest, right? Okay, this isn't because I'm a very good person. This is because I don't want to be the person that says, you said this was fake and my mum's dead now. I reiterate, okay, it's perfectly survivable if we've dealt with it in the right way. It's not the end of the world. It's not Ebola. It's kind of bad, and we don't know enough about it yet. And hopefully, when we get the tests and stuff like that, we'll figure out that we've all had it in November, and it's like, you know, it's not a problem. But until we can, all we can deal with is the data that we've got, and the data is showing that at the minute, 250,000 people who shouldn't have died. Everyone else that's going to be died, that would have died, has already died. They're not duking the stats. They're not using death certificates to lie. It's not an exosome. It's not been mistaken for something else. Okay, it's not a lie. It's not a hoax. It's a real thing. And pretending that it isn't a real thing is just silly, and it's just basically, it's not going to do anyone any good. So I don't want anybody to be terrified by this, because you shouldn't be terrified by this. But what's happened is you've got a load of people who tell you exactly what you want to hear. And the reason that they've done that is for personal gain. And I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I know there are a lot of people that do that, but I think it's crap. I think it's crap. I'm not doing it for any personal gain. I'm doing it through my own experience. My
Mm-hmm.
own experience.
No, I'm talking about you.
Just let me finish.
Yeah.
I've had a nurse who's been to visit me many times, and then she were off, and she came back and she said, "I've had COVID-19, and now I'm okay. I'm clear." Right.
Yeah.
I've 14 days in quarantine, and she was doing my leg. Right. So I believe it's crap. Right. I believe that there's this lockdown, the coronavirus, is a distraction from whatever the lockdown is really for, right? Now, now that to me, I know that there are people out there, like you've pointed out, and we were talking about it earlier today. We were talking about the guy.
I'm talking about those specific 4 people, though, Jason.
Yeah, those
anybody that's questioning this, because it's entirely right to question this. Those
4 people. Those are and you've shown me. I've not really took any notice of them. All I've been doing is I've been sort of like. I saw a great meme on Facebook today that said, if you didn't have a TV, would you know that there were a crisis with a virus? For me, that's what it is. It's they might be able to get into a petri dish and show us this stuff and say this is it, and there you go, and that's going to kill you. But we've been programmed for this for a long time, and you.
Oh yeah. No, I'm well with you on that
and stuff. Absolutely.
Like but this is the difference, right? Okay, between basically the whole thing being manufactured and then making hay when the sun shines, right? Okay, and people will say, but what about Event 201? What about the Rockefeller thing? Blah blah blah. What about this? I'm absolutely prepared to believe that they've reacted to this circumstance by going, you know, that plan we've got in our back pocket. Let's roll that out now, because this is.
But I see that. I mean, that when you talk about the thing, what were it? 209. Have you got anything? The 209 conference that we're in.
Yeah. It's fucking weird. It's freaky as hell. It's really, really weird, and it's beyond the coincidence.
For me, weird don't happen, right? This is weird. I explained this last night, and I'll tell it you tonight. This is a proper, real, true story, right? I over in January at some point, somebody sent me a credit card. They were mad enough to send me a credit card. Yeah. And I got this credit card one night, and I didn't spend much. It was a really cheap offer, but I bought a GoPro. Now, what do I need a GoPro for? I'm a one-legged bloke that I've been out for yonkers, right? And I thought, and I remember at the time on the show, I said, look, I mean, what do I need a fucking GoPro for? I'm not like doing root woods and everything. And I jokingly said, I'll put it to me mobility scooter. Now, it must be about a month, 6 weeks ago, but I was out in the woods on my mobility scooter with my dog in Graves Park in Sheffield, and there's a part of it that is a really narrow. It's a really narrow track, and there's a ravine that goes down. That's trees that goes down. It must go down 150 feet, right? And it's pretty much vertical. And so I'm going along on my mobility scooter. I've got my dog, you know, when we're going along, and this woman just stops at this really short, this really narrow area, and she's just her and her 2 dogs. So I'm trying to go round them, and I lose it, and I roll me mobility scooter.
For fuck's sake! Oh, right.
So the scooter rolls down halfway, and I roll down 3/4 of the way, and I had to be recovered by police and everything. Now, when I got to the bottom, I looked up at the woman, and she was just looking down at me, and just went away, just walked away. This woman with these 2 white dogs, I'll never forget it. And I thought to myself afterwards, that GoPro, that I GoPro for a reason, and I did not notice the reason. I didn't see it, but now I see that I didn't see it. And so I look on it, you know, I look about. So I had solid evidence against this woman. I weren't injured. I was just a bit bruised, and coppers ended up dragging me up, and some passerby dog walkers and stuff that got me, secured me mobility scooter so that it won't fall on me, because I'd fallen a little bit further than it. So, you know, it was just it just dawned on me that was the reason why you know, I bought this GoPro. And so people notice of these things. Sorry.
That's right. And I wouldn't rule it out by any stretch of the imagination, but I want some proof. Like, a coincidence is not proof. Now, if I walked past your house, right, and said, Jason, mate, your shed door's open, right? And then the next night your lawnmower gets nicked. It doesn't necessarily mean I nicked it just because I pointed out this potential for this happening.
No, of course it doesn't. No, of course it doesn't. I mean,
some people have gone to that absolutist thing of saying, "Oh, this was similar, so it must be that they're obviously, well, this is proof that it's all planned." Because no, it's not proof at all. It's a really.
No, I'm not talking about proof of being planned.
No.
I'm talking about
for a reason.
That things are happening for a reason.
Yeah.
Things can happen for a reason. And if you were to end this show on a lighter note, is that nobody knows what the real reason for all this is. Nobody knows. Nobody's got the reason. Nobody's at the top and said, this is the reason. Well, this is, and we've got the documents here. Nobody can do that. All anybody can do is speculate. You join dots, and you join dots, and you find things that people don't necessarily agree with, because it represents what they've something that they've ingested, and then they believed. There's no proof in that belief. It's just that they believe that, right? Yeah. So, you know, you can't. There's no science in a belief. Yeah. But again, there's no belief in science. There should be no belief in science. Yeah, there is.
Yeah, I know, man. I know. Well, no, you're absolutely right. This is the point, though. That, like, things do happen for a reason, and I think one of the things is that basically, like, it's shown that basically we need to be wary of the government. We need to be very wary of any system of control and look for the grift wherever it might be, whether it be from some bloke on YouTube or whether it be from the government saying, why not try this app? This app seems like a good thing. It's a data mining device. Don't accept it. Do not accept it by any stretch of the imagination. But perhaps that's just the thing. Perhaps this is some sort of lesson. And that's all that you can do about this thing, really, isn't it? Because I'm totally sympathetic with everybody. I understand why people are going out on these anti-lockdown things. I understand why people want to get back to work. I'm concerned that they're being told that there's only two options when there aren't two options by people who don't have their best interests at heart. But I totally understand. I understand everyone's frustration, and I understand everybody having a go at me in the comments, because basically I'm shitting on something that had given you false hope. But what I'm trying to do here is basically say that false hope really doesn't help anybody. Okay, and
we've got to be realistic.
Well, it's always prudent to look at these things.
We've got to be really. Look, somebody sent me a fantastic message today. We're about you know that my co-host and me we separated over the weekend, and somebody sent me a really good and a really interesting Skype message. Oh God, fucking hell! And there was somebody written it, and I can't fucking remember what it is now. I had it in my head. That's why we're going to say it. I'm sorry. We've gone over anyway, so we're not on. We're not on. It were really nice way of saying that. It were a really nice way of saying, look, we can't all agree on everything. Sometimes things happen. I think things happen for a reason. Sometimes you recognize the reason that it happens, and sometimes you don't recognize the reason. And then if you can recognize the reason afterwards, you can then prepare for it next time.
Well, that's how you learn lessons, isn't it? That's how people progress as human beings and as societies and everything. Like, it's one of these things where basically you've got to, like, you look back and say when you're 20 or something like that and go, oh, that was twatty. And you feel that sort of like shame because you did something silly. And you shouldn't feel shame, because that shows that you've grown. That shows that basically you wouldn't do that now, and that you've evolved as a human being. And this is the point, like, okay, you've got to, like, in a sense with data, you've got to basically be available to change your mind should you learn new things. And you should also be available to all different things. And so again, like, what people seem to be missing in this is, because a lot of people have been really cross in the comments and saying, oh, look at Neil shooting this shit down, and basically he's not listening to this, stuff like that. It's like, no, logically it dictates that I've listened to it thoroughly. That's the point, right? Okay, I've really listened to all of these people's arguments, and I've gone away and checked it, okay? Because I cared about it that much to go, oh, this seems really interesting, okay? What I've not done is accept it on face value. I've actually checked it. I've listened to their argument. I've not dismissed their argument. I've taken it on board and gone, that's really interesting. Now let's go away and find out if that's true. And that's what everyone should do. You should question everything. You should always question everything. So don't take my word for any of this. Go back through this. Look at the documents I've flashed up. Make sure they're real.
But it is nice to hear a different voice, you know, because we get people on. We'll get people on, and oftentimes it's
just because basically
people saying the same shit and having different different theories about what might happen or what may happen. It's good to have somebody on who's got a different. And do you know what? If anybody who criticizes me for having you on, fuck you, don't fucking listen to me again. I can't give a fuck. I don't do this because I'm some sort of fucking narcissist. I do this because I enjoy talking to people, and you know, people enjoy listening. We've got good numbers. We've got record numbers tonight. People enjoy listening. Right, even though most people in the chat room have been fucking giving you loads of grief, we've got record numbers tonight. So
I've answered every single one of their questions, though. But if they go back through this, I've answered every single one of your questions.
Perhaps haven't, because there were long periods of time we were talking. In fact, we've probably got another show in this, and I'd fucking
we'll do another show. We'll come back. I'll come back. And you know what? If somebody points out something that basically says, "Oh, you know what, Neil, you're wrong about this," I'll go, "Oh, cool, thank you, brilliant." Now we can find out the truth, because this is the point. I'm doing what you were doing. I'm trying to find out what the fuck is going on with this. Right, okay, I've got no vested interest in it. I'm not making vaccines. I'm not on the government's payroll or anything like this. Like, I want to find out what's going on, right? And it's difficult to find these things if there's so much crap muddying the waters. So let's have a look at the information that's out there and go, oh, sorry, mate, you're wrong about that. Like, you know, let's move on. It is what it is.
Yeah. Anyway, so we've done fucking 2.5 hours. We're only going to do 2 hours. I'm a bit knackered. I think you were perhaps a bit knackered. So we're gonna end it there. A big thank you. We've had record numbers. I could not be more pleased with how this has gone. Anybody that that thinks that I'm a cunt for having Neil on, don't fucking listen again. I don't care.
What the fuck is that about? Like, come on.
I really don't give a fuck. Honestly, I don't do the. Yeah, I don't do it. Listen. Anyway.
I'm really
fucking winds me up. People were, I'm all open-minded. I'm awake, and I'm fucking this, and I'm down rabbit hole and everything. And then somebody points them down another fucking rabbit hole. They won't go down it. Oh, I'm not going down there. It's too fucking scary. It's just too difficult for me. Fucking yeah. Shut it, Jason. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
What can you do?
I will shut it. I'll be back on Thursday at midday. I've got a guy who I've been speaking to, who's been doing some videos about coronavirus and stuff like that, and he's in Malaysia. So I'm going to do it at midday. It's going to be 7 o'clock his time, so I'm going to do it live then. That should be interesting. And we're definitely going to get you back, aren't we, Neil? We're definitely
absolutely. I'm not going out. There's nothing to fucking do.
Half the stuff we didn't get through. Listen, I can deal with people fucking saying, "Oh, I don't agree with that. I don't agree with this. I don't agree with that." I don't agree. I'm not fucking having, oh, this guy's a fucking shill, or this guy's this guy. That's like fucking school ground stuff. Throwing
people's got no argument, and the amygdala are going off because they feel foolish. They go to the insults. It's like, it's obvious.
Yeah. Anyway, well, thank you for everybody that's
actually, Jason, because I've had a fucking marvelous time actually, and thank you for sort of letting me get my shit across. You were like, you questioned me, like, and you forced me to actually prove my points. You didn't just sit there and just take it like Brian Rose, and like, you actually, and you argued back against me. And you know what? I might not be right about some of these things. Okay, because as I say, I'm just trying to find out what the answer is, like everybody else. But thank you, man, because like, this could have been much harder. And no, you were great. So thank you. I very much appreciate that.
That's the show, mate. Listen, I've always wanted to. I wanted this show to be, and I know you do get your you do get your opinion across on other shows and other platforms and stuff, but I wanted this show to be just everything, not just one side, not just, this COVID fucking 19, this bloke says, because I've seen that stuff, that Kaufman stuff, and and I've seen him stood there in his nice shirt and he looks really pretty and he's in a tropical climate and he's telling you all his PhDs and all this sort of stuff, and to have a different opinion, a different outlook, and somebody who's not just looked at the pretty boy in the fucking shirt in the Bahamas or wherever the fuck he worked. It looked exotic. I know it were inside, but it looked exotic, didn't it? Really, didn't it?
This like a pine door. Like Look, I get it, right? Okay, because basically I say this has been happening with all the stuff that I've done with Cambridge Analytica and all this like this. Basically, what I'm doing at the minute is pointing out that the clown at the party is a paedophile, and everyone's getting fucking annoyed because I'm ruining the party. And it's like, yeah, that is very true. I appreciate I am ruining the party, but at the same time, the clown's just taking your kid off to the shed. So sometimes it's prudent to listen to an alternative viewpoint.
Well, we all should do that, and look, we love all our listeners. Just some of the messages. It was just I was disappointed in some of the people who I know that have been in here in the chat room, and some people who have been co-hosts on this channel that were putting stuff in that I didn't really like. So
I'm not afraid to answer these questions. Like, to be honest, like, compile all these questions, mate, and I'll come back on. Like, and we'll see if we can answer it. I don't know whether perhaps you'd want to send them to me a bit beforehand so I can like figure it out or whatever, but I'll happily do that. Right? I think there's got nothing to gain from this. Nothing, like, there's no ulterior motive. This is some shit I've found, and I think you should know about this because the stuff that other people are saying might actually do you harm.
Brilliant. Well, anyway, thanks for coming along, Neil. You've got an open invitation. Anytime you want. If you want to vent about some other stuff, because I mean, this coronavirus, COVID-19, there have been many layers. I mean, 5G started off, you know, there's been many different layers. So we'll get on to that another time. But anyway, thanks for coming on, and thank you to everybody for listening. Everyone who's joined in the chat room. Thanks to my wife, who's been well, she's been moderator in the chat room for the first time tonight. So I love you, baby. I hope you.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry to your wife. Like, bye, Sharon. Like, bless these people.
All right. Take it easy, everybody. We'll see you on Thursday, 12 o'clock. Don't miss it.